recording. And why do we have a bad looking signal? Looks like everything's connected fine. So hello. Hopefully we'll have some people jumping in soon. I'll wait a couple of minutes before I start watching this fun stuff, if you will. I wanted to do. I haven't done a reaction video in a while, and I wanted to be able to just have a time where I could sit and do the whole thing and do it live instead of doing it, late at night and cutting it up and bringing everything up. Sometimes I've cut things up, but I wanted to just go through the whole thing, and there may be some repetition here and everything going on. So if you're watching afterwards, you'll probably be able to skip forward through some of it if you want, but hopefully I'll be able to insert some commentary as I pause it in between what we're going to be looking at, because here's the thing with Steven Crowder. Let me just go ahead and first share to Twitter that I am live now so that anybody who wants to can join in. So let's just go ahead and do that on this monitor. Streaming live now. Join us. Hashtag abortion. Hashtag Roe v. Wade. Hashtag Steven Crowder. Crowded. I typed that wrong almost. Tweet. It is tweeted away. And I'm recording this while I'm streaming it, so if I want to cut it up and make a shorter cut up video, make it a too long didn't watch type situation, I can do that as well if I decide I have the time to do it. So, hey Kimchi, thank you very much for joining us in the chat. Hopefully we'll have a couple more people. We do have some concurrent viewers, 2 likes. Make sure if you like the fact that Madison Cawthorn lost, go ahead and smash that like button as well, and smash subscribe to Julie. Thank y'all for joining. I'm sure we're gonna have more in a second. That's why I'm waiting a few seconds to go ahead and start the real introduction to this video. The reason why I'm doing this, I have done live streams before, or have done live reactions before. I've done like to Trump during his speeches or whatever, and that was more of a reaction to a live event. Like I'd see a press conference coming on during COVID, and I would just go run to the computer and start the live, and boom, there you go. And I would just do it live as they were speaking. In this case, this is a video that's already up on Steven Crowder's website, on Steven Crowder's YouTube channel, if you will. And my thing with Steven Crowder is that he probably can't hear me well because my microphone was way over there. So here we go. Let's do the real start now that I have the microphone where it's supposed to be. Anyway, so wow. It's gonna be one of those nights. Anyway, so Steven Crowder, I've seen some of his videos. I hadn't watched many of his videos in a while. Kind of like I sometimes like to listen to conservatives for show prep. I mean, clearly, you can't comment on what the other side is doing unless you watch what they're doing. And if you're not familiar with who Steven Crowder is, if you've seen the memes online that say, change my mind, when someone's sitting at a table and they edit out the words, and instead they'll be like, pineapple belongs on pizza, change my mind, or pineapple doesn't belong on pizza, change my mind. And so he's the one usually sitting behind the chair unless they change that too. But he does these series where he goes to like college campuses and other places, and he'll set up a table and he'll get all these people coming in, and people will encircle the tent just to kind of watch what's going on. And he'll interview people, he'll ask them questions. I guess maybe they'll answer questions back. And one of the problems that I have, hey Ethan, hey, and who else is joining? Ethan joined up, Eli Matoya, thank you for joining us as well. One of the things that I think that he does, and now if I'm wrong, and I'll admit that I'm wrong, and we'll see at this video if this is an example of me being correct or not, or if he does allow people who maybe he thinks are, not as smart as he is, if, from his perspective. I think his purpose, I don't think, is to get a fair representation of what people think on the issues. I think he wants to, own the libs and make himself look like he's the smartest guy in the room. And you don't do that by letting other people get interviewed if and letting them have their say. Because if they're interviewed and they have their say, and they make you look like you have the bad argument, then you're not going to win the fight. So I have an opinion that he's likely going to be, that this could very well be very edited, and maybe he edits out the people. So, but we'll see. If he lets somebody in who I feel owns him, then maybe I'll change my mind. But I have the opinion that he's likely going to be somebody who is not going to be doing that, whose motivation is to make his case against abortion and try and maybe convince these people, or even go so far as to trick the people into believing something that maybe they wouldn't ordinarily believe, or get them to admit something by asking the question in a weird way and like trapping them, whatever. Kind of like one of those, when did you stop beating your wife type questions. Well, I didn't stop beating my wife. I didn't. Oh, so you didn't stop beating your wife, so you're still beating your wife? No. So to me, it's that potentially type of situation. So anyway, without further ado, here it is. Again, if you haven't liked the video yet, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also, please make sure if you want to support the channel above and beyond subscribing, you can go to patreon.com/liberaldan. You can go to liberaldan.com. You can find the Buy Me a Cider link, and you can buy me a cider that way, or you can just directly Venmo me, liberaldan on Venmo, at liberaldan on Venmo. So without further, and there'll be no commercials here. I'm not gonna be, I'll accept minor plugs for myself. This is not a podcast. I'm not doing this with call-ins on Blog Talk Radio. I'm just, because I'm on Blog Talk Radio, I haven't quite figured out how to get the audio to go from a YouTube video to come through Blog Talk Radio. So once we cross that hurdle, maybe I'll do these along with Blog Talk Radio as well. But without
what's the difference between the
I did watch a
now
little bit
child
of this.
breastfeeding versus the child who is relying on the nutrients inside the body? Is
That's
what
my
you're
question.
saying? Yeah. Well, it's the person that had the child inside their body is. Where am I going with this?
See, there you go. That's the type of thing that he wants to highlight. Somebody who's lost their train of thought somehow magically becomes an individual whose point is somehow invalid, I would think, in his point of view.
So after news broke from the leak that the Supreme Court will allegedly overturn Roe v. Wade, of course the media jumped on it, and this happened.
If the court overturns Roe v. Wade, it will be a direct assault on freedom.
69% of Americans say they do not want the court to overturn Roe v. Wade.
If this is issued over 20 states, there's a trigger where abortion will automatically be banned.
I cannot tell you the outrage I feel at this decision.
The Republicans have been working toward this day for decades.
Women will die.
Abortion,
That's correct so far.
What are the next things that are going to be attacked?
I'm killing her! I'm killing the baby!
Okay, that seems bad. But that could be because most Americans don't actually know what the overturning of Roe v. Wade really means.
And that it probably very well be true. There may be people who don't understand what overturning Roe v. Wade does on both sides of the aisle. But there are a lot of people who do understand what it means, and he's probably going to manipulate, it doesn't mean this, it means that, by ignoring, like, maybe it doesn't mean that abortion is illegal. It just means that states have the right to or have the authority to now ban it because this is no longer the law of the land. But in reality, if that's the case, he would then be ignoring the fact that states have trigger laws that will automatically ban abortion instantly in many, if not all cases, once Roe v. Wade is overturned. So here we go. Let's go.
So contrary to gotcha journalism with Man in the Street, we decided.
Yeah, contrary to gotcha journalism, we're going to see how many times he tries to do a gotcha moment when it comes to these questions that he might ask.
To just go and talk with people and find out.
I always want to say it like in a Boston accent. Louder with prouder.
Actually, if you guys do have a couple minutes, we're just asking, have you been any of you been following the Roe v. Wade overturning?
What is it?
The federal Supreme Court, the abortion law?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So,
I heard about that.
Yeah, do you mind if I ask you? We're just kind of getting a feel for everybody where they line up on this. What do you think about it?
Well, see, it is. He's already misrepresenting what happened because, Roe versus Wade is not a law. It's a ruling that prevents laws from taking place because they're protecting rights of the individuals. So he's already misrepresenting it as a quote law. So let's continue.
It's so Roe v. Wade. Yeah, it's the Supreme Court. There was a leak. We're assuming it's true. It seems like it's true. They're going to be overturning Roe v. Wade,
which is like they're going to be letting people abort their child.
So this is a good question, and this isn't because a lot of people didn't really understand this. A lot of people think that overturning Roe v. Wade means there'll be a federal ban on abortion.
Yeah.
It just.
I don't know. I don't know if he's going to provide any data on that. I don't know. It's kind of like Donald Trump. Many people are saying so and such and such. I don't know how many people believe that overturning Roe versus Wade instantly puts into place a federal ban on abortions, because that's clearly not the case. Now, are there some who believe that? Sure. There might be some on the left and on the right who both believe that. Some on the right are probably like, yay, abortion's illegal now, and they're not understanding it. So, but I can't, he doesn't present the figures, so I can't say what it is those numbers are. How many people really believe that? I would have a feeling that it's probably much lower than he's representing. He's probably making it a bigger case than it actually is.
Means that it'll go back to the states, where states can make their own laws if they want to have restrictions, and if states don't want to have restrictions, they don't have to have restrictions.
I think it's up to a female, bro. I think it should be a female decision.
Okay.
It's her body. It's, so.
Now, of course, remember, he's saying it should be a decision of the female. Liberal Dan Radio, I try and be inclusive of all people of all genders, all gender identities. So there are trans men who can get pregnant. There are non-binary folks who can get pregnant. There are women who clearly can get pregnant. So when I'm trying to, I always try and state my argument in such a way that's inclusive of everybody who can get pregnant. But when we're clearly there are people who are going to simplify it, and I'll deal with those comments as quoting them as they come. So just to let you know kind of my stance on it.
If the man was carrying the baby, I feel like it'll be up to the man. But since the woman, God has it, the woman gets to carry the baby, then it's her.
What about the law, though, of like Supreme Court putting it back to the states? Does that seem reasonable?
You can't put laws on people's bodies and people's. Fuck off!
I assume you know that guy.
No.
No?
Nah, but they can't be talking just because we're doing something. And,
Yeah. So you don't think that states should be allowed to have restrictions on it?
No, I don't think the federal or the state should have it. I think it should be up to the parents.
Amen, hallelujah. But we'll see if he's able to manipulate the conversation to make him contradict himself, I guess, and that's ultimately what he's going to try and do. When I've seen these types of videos before, he's going to try and make an argument to try and make them contradict themselves, and as such, make him look like the superior person in the argument.
It's a parental thing.
Depending on the age.
Yeah.
Depending on the age.
Depending on the age, you think.
Daily News says men can't get pregnant. Trans men can get pregnant. If you're a trans man, you can get pregnant. It's not all of them. If people are post-operative or have already had gender reaffirming surgeries, it's possible that they can't get pregnant. But trans men, there are examples of trans men who can get pregnant. So we are respecting people's identities here on Liberal Dan Radio, Daily News.
There should be restrictions?
It's another way of controlling the population.
Controlling what we do, basically,
So you say you think it's a good thing to control the population that
No,
way?
not at all, because it depends on what they're doing, because it seemed like back in the days, Plan B was all in black people's neighborhoods.
Yeah, well, do you know Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger they set up shop, these abortion clinics in black neighborhoods because she wanted to abort more black babies.
And here we go. Here's the first big manipulation from Steven Crowder. Yes, Margaret Sanger was a eugenicist and she was racist. Yes, that is a fact, and even Planned Parenthood acknowledges that. But what he probably won't acknowledge, or what he won't bring up, is that Planned Parenthood has denounced Margaret Sanger's eugenicist ideas, and Planned Parenthood only exists to make sure that when people who want to get pregnant can get the health care that they need while they're pregnant, and people who don't want to get pregnant can get the help to prevent themselves from getting pregnant. But if they do get pregnant and it's unwanted, then they can find the resources to terminate the pregnancy. So no, Planned Parenthood is not doing what Margaret Sanger wanted them to do, because Margaret Sanger was a racist eugenicist. Planned Parenthood is not being racist and eugenicist. And here's the other thing that conservatives love to bring up. Well, Planned Parenthood, I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast yesterday. Planned Parenthood, they like to say Planned Parenthood goes into black neighborhoods purposely to kill black babies. Because they believe in the myth of supply-side economics, and they think in a whole, if you build it, they will come theory, where, where they don't believe that businesses are going to, do some sort of market analysis and figure, oh, this is where the demand for our services is the greatest, so let's put ourselves in the middle of where the demand is the greatest. And if the demand is greatest in poorer neighborhoods, then they're going to go into poorer neighborhoods, because poorer people might be more likely to get an abortion because they might feel less likely to be able to support a child when that child is born. Furthermore, black people, because of the systemic marginalization and disenfranchisement of black people in this country, are more likely to live in poverty. So, ergo, you're going to wind up getting more Planned Parenthoods in black neighborhoods because they're there fulfilling the demand for their services, and not just abortion services, for making sure you don't get pregnant, for services for giving prenatal care, etc. So, no, Planned Parenthood isn't going into black neighborhoods purposely to kill black babies. It's a ridiculous argument made by people who believe the myth in supply-side economics. Let's see, Ethan Weeder, I don't love Planned Parenthood, but they have clearly been overly demonized. Why not distribute funding more equally to them and family planning groups in all areas? Well, in many areas, Ethan, Planned Parenthood is the only group, is the only entity that can give. When I talk about this all the time, when Jeb Bush was governor of Florida, he defunded Planned Parenthood. He took funds away from them, which caused several Planned Parenthoods in the state to close. Now, in certain counties, and like rural counties, the Planned Parenthood was the only clinic that people could go to get prenatal care, only clinic that they could go to get, preventive care to keep themselves from being pregnant in the first place. So when they did that, they didn't just stop abortions and they didn't stop abortions from taking place in Florida, because when he defunded Planned Parenthood, abortion rates went up in Florida. So in many places, Planned Parenthood is the only one that gets the money because Planned Parenthood is the only one providing the services. Now, if you have multiple clinics in an area because an area is more densely populated, then those other areas are going to get, if they do whatever they need to do to qualify for Medicaid funding, for Medicare funding, for any other type of federal funding, then yes, that they're going to get, Planned Parenthood will get those funds, and those other ones will get those funds as well. But yes, I do agree with you, though, that Planned Parenthood is overly demonized. Daily News, is Planned Parenthood good to be in Walmart? Are there Planned Parenthoods in Walmart? I don't know. I don't really want. I can check that later. Just remind me, or you can verify that if it's yes or no. But Walmarts have lots of businesses in them, like in the front. And as long as the clinic is sterile, as long as the clinic is someplace that is, going to treat their patients and make sure that they have a sterile environment so that, the person coming in for services don't get harmed, then I have no problem where it is. I mean, why not have a Planned Parenthood where a lot of people in an area might go? And if the demand is centered in that area and Walmart has a spot and Planned Parenthood wants to rent the spot out, who cares? Who cares if it's in the if it's in the Walmart, if the Planned Parenthood's in the same parking lot, in the same strip mall, right down the street? They should be where the demand is for their services. So.
Yeah. So they can have the rates going down.
Right.
So,
but that's a bad thing if you're saying that.
Yeah.
So that does that maybe make you think about abortion
at the end
twice?
of the day, I feel like this, right? We in America, right? At the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's supposed to be like freedom. You see me?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, why? You know what I'm saying? We don't have the freedom to do what we want to do. It's not really like,
I mean, I understand, but so the other side of the argument that people have is, and I'm curious here because he said woman, so he's basically, this is him saying he wants to punt, he wants to go to you. He's like, have her answer, he doesn't want to piss you off.
Yeah.
But you understand the other side of the argument is if someone, if scientists and if biologists say, well, it's not really that person's body if it's a baby in their body. That's why, for example, like Texas, their limitation is a heartbeat. Once there's a separate heartbeat, they're saying you can't have an abortion.
The Texas law is a 6-week bill, and in reality, it's not a heart. There's a clump of cells, there might be some pulsating that goes on, like some electrical impulses that starts the circulation of blood. It's not a heart. It's not even a fully formed heart. The heart isn't fully formed until about maybe 10 to 12 weeks, I think it is. It's not at 6 weeks. And even then, it's not, I think 20 or 24 weeks is when because I think a lot of the research that was done on other mammals' hearts showed that the musculature around the heart in those animals formed much more quickly. I think in humans, in order for a heart to completely work and to be a heart that can operate outside of the uterus, that heart is probably going to be fully formed around 20 weeks. Before 20 weeks, it's not really a viable heart, and at 6 weeks, it's not even a heart. People will say, "Oh, you can hear the heartbeat," and it's in the vernacular that it's the heartbeat, but it really isn't. It really, really isn't. So let's. But of course, he is going to be promoting it has a heartbeat. So therefore, let's promote feelings. Conservatives will often be like, "Well, facts don't care about your feelings." Well, you want to have feelings. Even if you assign personhood to an embryo, even if you want to say that this tiny little fetus that's so small that hard to even see, not even showing up that you're pregnant. Even if you want to assign full-on personhood to a fetus, no person has the right to use the body of another for a second without their consent, let alone for 9 months without 9 months of consent. So even this is about autonomy. Now, maybe in Roe versus Wade, maybe if you want to argue that Roe versus Wade was about trimesters and fetal viability, then okay, that's fine. It doesn't necessarily take into consideration that argument of autonomy. There's some privacy discussions, I think, in Casey versus Planned Parenthood. But, and if you want to argue that part, but again, at the first trimester, it's not even viable. So if you're talking viability, a first trimester embryo fetus is not viable at all. Second, it starts to get questionable towards the end. Third trimester, it could be. Doesn't necessarily mean that it will be. We can talk about that more later, I'm sure. But there's that whole idea that 6 weeks is some magic number. No, it's nowhere near the point where it's a real heart. So let's see. A lot of states forbid abortion during third trimester, which is reasonable to me as long as you have done a lot for the baby, and the baby will likely feel pain by then. Now, my opinion on that, Ethan, is that do we really need the law to interfere with something that is not really happening? Like, if you look up the data, I think in 2018, when I looked up this data from the charts, I think it's one of my TikToks that I have, maybe 1% of abortions take place after week 21, or 21 and after. Only 1% of abortions take place week 1 and after, or 1% of abortions take place week 21 or after. So the amount of abortions as a percentage that are people getting, like 60% takes place in the first 6 to 8 weeks. And so you have 60% of people immediately finding out that they're pregnant and immediately going to go take care of it. So why are we making a law for this 1%? And who is getting an abortion at 1%? It's not somebody in that last portion of the pregnancy, who in the last trimester of a pregnancy. Nobody is waiting to the last trimester and going, you know what, I changed my mind. I really don't want to have this baby. I'm just going to have an abortion. No, nobody is waiting until month 7, month 8, month 9 to yeetus the fetus. Those people who are getting these late-term abortions are people who either are having health conditions like preeclampsia. Now, I'll say this. They were concerned about my wife having preeclampsia when she was pregnant. So we ended the pregnancy a week early. Now, it was a C-section and we had the child, but we ended the pregnancy a week early. I guess you could say we terminated the abortion or terminated the pregnancy, or maybe we aborted the pregnancy because we took both of our kids a week early. Before contractions even started happening. We ended the pregnancy for her health, for her safety. Now most people who are at 39 weeks who need to deal with the preeclampsia are going to do that. They're going to have the C-section. They're not going to want to have an abortion that terminates the life of the fetus at 39 weeks. The only people that are going to do that are if you have a situation where the health of the woman or the health of the pregnant person is going to be so impacted, like you might die, you might be crippled, that you can't risk it. And something comes up and says, okay, the only way, the safest way to deal with this is to terminate the pregnancy. Or you have an example of fetal abnormalities where the fetus is either already dead or is going to die as soon as the fetus is born because they can't live outside the womb. And why would you then force the person who's pregnant to continue to gestate for an additional 1, 2, 3 months in that third trimester simply because you think it's immoral to terminate the pregnancy, even despite the fact that the fetus is going to die once or is already dead at this point in time? So it's cruel. It's cruel to the person who's gestating to do that. And even there are some laws that are written that prevent like the dilation and extraction. That's a procedure that's used to basically handle what happens after somebody miscarries. My wife had one of those as well, dilation and extraction, because there was a miscarriage that took place, and it happens, and she had to get that dilation and to D&C. They couldn't do that under certain laws, so you have to just naturally give birth to the byproducts of a miscarriage and not just deal with it now that you can deal with it. It's absurd. It's a rejection of science. Let's see. Jolie, I've never been able to wrap my head around anyone thinking they have the right to have an opinion about when someone else does with their own body. Yeah. What is it? If there's a pimp finds out why are you on Pimps Daily News? I don't understand this. Ethan says, I think late term should only be for health conditions. But that's the thing. There's no evidence to show that it's not. There's no evidence to show that the people who are getting those abortions, the 1% who are getting those abortions in the latest terms of pregnancy, there's no evidence showing that they're doing it for any other reason but health reasons. So here's my point on that. Why make a law to make it harder on the person who needs to take care of their own body? Why make this person who's already having to deal with what's likely a tragic decision for them? Because if they're in the third trimester, they're probably already bought the crib. They probably already started buying clothes. They might even have a name picked out already. They've already started to love the child that's going to be born. And then they have to make this decision as to whether or not they want to risk death or deliver, or they have to make this decision to go ahead and deal with the fetal abnormality because this didn't go the way that was planned. It was already a hard enough decision. Why make them jump through legal hoops to have to deal with it anymore? That's why my position is 100% abortions without exception, because it's just cruel to force those people to have to jump through hoops when they're already having to deal with such a problematic.
Yeah, okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense, because if it's in the heartbeat, then how can you say that's not murder?
Right.
Yeah, that is.
So then maybe you would. So you think Texas should be allowed to?
Just went from now. There's the other possibility that I could bring up, and what potentially could be happening is, and I'm not saying it is, but Crowder could also be bringing in people to bring up one argument, and then like actors, like they bring in the actors. They say they disagree with him, and then Stephen, you made this magical argument. It's like, see, this guy over here just basically went from the government shouldn't be involved in what goes on with the body to, well, if it's a heartbeat, it's murder. How do you go from one to the other? That makes me question whether or not this is an authentic interview, or whether or not this interview is, being staged or somehow being made to elevate, promote the opinion that, Stephen Crowder has the superior argument, because just like that, he was able to convince 4 supposed liberals that maybe there should be exceptions when it comes to abortions, and maybe a heartbeat is the point where it should be considered.
Place a limitation, like at a heartbeat, maybe.
At a heartbeat, seems like it meets everybody halfway.
A specification of once it gets to a certain standard and certain stage, you should be able to and should be able not to. Definitely, once it has a heartbeat, I don't think.
Okay. So you said, this is you two are together?
Yeah.
So you have 3 kids, you said?
We got 4 kids.
You got 4 kids. So you did the ultrasound, and I just had my first twins. So you remember that first? Yeah.
Congratulations.
They're tough.
Yeah.
By the way, anyone who tells you that boys and girls aren't different, bullshit. Going out have one boy and one girl twin. You know, she starts talking really young, and she's verbal, and he's just but then he's just jumping and running around. Oh yeah, more action. Yeah. It's not even close.
More action, no talking.
Oh yeah, the bullshit that all the rich white.
He has 3 girls and 1 boy.
Yeah, all the.
And this is proposing, so I'm sure that the reason that his kids are acting the way that they're acting is probably because of nurture, probably because how they're raising them, but there are maybe some natural, mind, psychological things that the kids might have just naturally as part of this, but you can't just point at 2 kids and say, well, this is proof that genders are different. No, I have 2 kids. They're both boys. They're different. My youngest son, would never think of putting anything that's a foreign object in his mouth. My youngest son would put everything in his mouth. My oldest son was more chill. My oldest son is more chill. Youngest son is more rambunctious. There's differences between the 2 because all people are different. So this idea that Steven Crowder can make this determination, oh, the genders are clearly different because of my 2 kids, that's bizarre. It's just it's a what's the argument that I'm looking for? The name of it. He's using whatever.
The rich white liberal are trying to be like, it's all society. I'm like, no. I have not taught anything to these twins. That is a boy. Exactly. That is a girl. She grabs something, she tries to put it in her mouth. He grabs something, he tries to hit you with it.
Yeah,
that's like what he does.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, exactly. So you remember that first ultrasound where you saw the heartbeat?
Yeah, of course.
So you would.
Yeah, the ultrasound saw the blood vessels pulsating, and I think some of the sources that I read up on before this, because I've seen a little bit of the beginning of this interview and a little bit further on. I haven't watched the whole thing through, but you have it's. Sometimes it might not even be the heart that you're picking up. It could be the vibrations from the instrument that you're picking up. But, fine. Your blood vessels are pumping. That's not the same thing as a heart. And I'm gonna double down on that as well. So Ethan Weber, I think if you have a healthy baby, it's wrong to abort the baby after 26 weeks. Does nobody else think that's reasonable? Again, but who after 26 weeks is aborting who is doing so by choice? But who is aborting at 26 weeks that's not facing some sort of dilemma, some sort of problem that has reared its ugly head? Nobody's doing this. Not at all. 1% of abortions are after 21 weeks. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head of what 26 and beyond is, but 21 is only 1%. So this is not a problem. So that's a lot of times that people like to do in politics, and a lot of times conservatives do. I'm sure liberals do it too, but they manufacture this dilemma, and now they have to solve it. There's nothing to solve because no one's really doing it. Nobody's waiting that long to get an abortion simply because they want to yeetus the fetus and don't want to be a parent.
I would say at that point that's a life.
That's it.
Okay.
It's a life. That's a life.
Well then, look, that's kind of why I was having this conversation, because the Supreme Court, before this ruling now of overturning Roe v. Wade, Texas wouldn't have had the right to say, okay, after a heartbeat you can't have an abortion. So
nitpick, Texas doesn't have rights. Texas's powers, people have rights. Texas would have this ruling would now give the authority to Texas to trample on people's rights. Let's continue.
Now the overturning of Roe v. Wade means Texas can have that law.
Yeah.
Okay. So that seems like something
Texas always does his own thing, man. Texas is always like that. They don't
well, they couldn't though. It was technically illegal for Texas to do that.
Yeah, they're becoming more liberal.
But a heart. Yeah. So we would see. I think that's a good place to find common ground. In other words, you have people who are abortion all the way up to 9 months, and being a mother, I would assume you're like that's ridiculous.
Right. Yeah.
Then you have some people who think no abortions, but a heartbeat, good place to start.
Yeah.
All right.
Exactly. A heartbeat is a good place.
I think that's a lot of people in the country, but unfortunately you see the protests, you see the media making it seem like something it isn't, and people go nuts.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of people are kind of like you in a slide.
But they aren't making it seem like something it isn't. You're the one who's making it seem like they're saying it's something it isn't. So.
Sliding scale.
People just don't know what they want.
Yeah.
That's what it is. People don't know what they want.
Yeah. Because a heartbeat is, you can start hearing it now at 6 weeks, but certainly 10 weeks.
Yeah.
Because, I remember seeing the little heartbeat, like, oh my gosh. I don't know about you as a dad, but for me, I was just paranoid. Or I'm like, all right, just make sure she doesn't take any stairs and falls down. I'm like, because we can't do anything. The baby's not in us. We're just like, just don't do anything that could hurt the baby.
Keep her in a bubble.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Just because you hear the of the ultrasound. It doesn't mean that this fetus is going to be able to survive outside the body, that is viable. And that's what Roe v. Wade dealt with, viability. It's not viable. It's not viable. I don't care if you're hearing a, quote, heartbeat. If the heart's not fully formed, the synapses aren't there, this entity, this growing embryo, fetus, whatever you want to call it, the baby as they're calling it, whatever you want to call it, it's not viable. It can't survive without relying 100% on the person who's gestating. And that person should get to decide how their body gets used by anybody else. So even if you want to grant full-on personhood to an embryo or to a fetus, that still doesn't mean that embryo or fetus gets to use the body of the person who's pregnant without that person's consent. And there are other issues to deal with, but we'll deal with some of them. We'll see if he brings up those other issues. If it's not germane, then I won't bring them up.
Bubble wife. All right. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate you. Thanks for educating me on that too. What was your name, by the way?
Sarah.
Sarah? Nice to meet you, Sarah. What's your name?
Sierra.
Sierra and Sarah. Right. I'll try and get it straight. So, look, we're just asking people today. Have you been following sort of the leak of the alleged overturning of Roe v. Wade?
I'm
alleged overturning of Roe v. Wade. If it stays the same, it's going to overturn Roe v. Wade. And according to Chief Justice Roberts, it's a legitimate document. So it's been leaked. And I mean, if somehow these protests have managed to sway one person's mind, then okay, cool. Then we won't see Roe v. Wade overturned. But I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think they're going to cave. Maybe they will. Hopefully they will. But I don't think they will.
I'm not really following completely, but
okay. Yeah, and you nodded your head yes.
I mean, I followed it for the leak is horrible, but I followed the abortion controversy for a while. I've had my stance on I think we should have safe abortion.
Wait, Aaron West says there's no soul there, and I really don't think we should. I mean, the idea of ensoulment is a religious one. I mean, in Judaism, the soul doesn't enter the body until the baby takes their first breath. So it's not until birth where you get a soul. But that shouldn't be the religious argument. Shouldn't be the reason here. If I was going to make a religious argument, I would say that under my religion, Judaism requires the person who's pregnant to get an abortion if the pregnancy is life-threatening. There's a requirement. There's no choice there under Jewish law. You're required to save yourself. So if you're in the, and I think if you want, you can get graphic here, but the ruling, the Jewish ruling on this, on the Hebrew scholars that discuss when it's okay to perform an abortion, it's like if it's not halfway out yet and it's killing the person, you can perform the abortion. But if it's more than halfway out, you then have to deliver. I mean, and that's a requirement if the person's life is in danger. That not halfway out yet time is basically saying, look, your life is in, but you're about to die because in the middle of birth, you are required to dismember the fetus. I don't want to make that the law of the land. I don't want to make that a requirement for everybody that they have to do that. If you want to take the risk, that should be up to you. Your body, your decision. If you want to take that risk, you want to risk your body, you want to risk your health, you want to risk your life on a life-threatening situation, by all means, do it. You're free to do so. But other people should be free to not risk their lives. Wait, who's eating babies? Wait, where we've gotten to eating babies? Daily News, viable or not, it's a human form of life. I mean, my skin cells are human forms of life, and if I scratch my skin, I'm killing human cells. Is that a horrible thing? Am I an abortionist now? Am I immoral because I'm killing human cells? And there's scientific advancements could come very soon where you can take one of these non-pluripotent cells and inject it into an ova and do some magic to it, some scientific magic, and you'll be able to, you could potentially create a human without any sperm. So all of these, in that situation, all of these cells in my body could potentially be a human being. So that's the thing. An acorn is not a tree. Ingredients for a cake sitting in a bowl that haven't been mixed up are not a cake.
Okay. So what do you think about the Roe v. Wade? About it being overturned. If it likely happens.
I think it's a war on women, to be honest. I mean, I think it affects everybody.
Okay.
Not just women.
How so?
I mean, if man's out cheating, he doesn't want his mistress getting pregnant. She gets pregnant. What can you do?
That's kind of letting a piece of guy off the hook, though, isn't it?
I mean, yeah.
Well, I mean, if Donald Trump was cheating on his spouse, and if abortion was illegal in Florida, and he was cheating on Melania in Mar-a-Lago, and somebody ended up getting pregnant, and if abortion was illegal in Florida, Donald Trump would send that person to another state because, the laws don't apply to them. The laws don't apply to those people who are cheating and having mistresses or whatever, the hypocrites, so to speak.
Yeah, but
it shouldn't be cheating.
Yeah.
What is it that you said wrong?
Daily News. Wait, how can you devalue human life by comparing it to your own skin? How can I do it? Because they've done tests where they've taken, I think, was it Dolly the sheep, where they took a cell from, I forget where it was in the body, but it wasn't a pluripotent cell. They removed the chromosomal material from an egg and inserted that cell, and then I think they shocked it with somehow. I don't know how they shocked it. I'm not a geneticist. I'm not particularly understanding every single aspect of it, but it then created a sheep. It was a clone of that sheep. Dolly was the name, and you could look it up to see exactly how they did it. But if you can take a cell that's non-pluripotent and put it into a chromosome removes ova, and then develop it and then implant it into somebody and make that become a human or a baby after 9 months, then all of these skin cells on my body, all of these cells on my body has the potential to be a human, just like an embryo has the potential to be a person. But potential doesn't mean that they are. Go back to the whole argument that I've brought up on, you have a room, you have your hospital's on fire, you're in a room, there's a freezer with a cart on one side that you can only push one thing. You can either push the freezer that has 1,000 embryos in it, or you can push the infant out that has a cart. And the cart each of them has its own battery supply, so they'll both survive. Whatever you push out will survive until you can get it plugged into something else. But you only have the time and ability to push one of those two things out. Everybody listening to this right now, and everybody not listening to this right now, is going to take the infant and push the infant to safety. Nobody is going to say, well, there's 1,000 frozen embryos, so that's 1,000 people, so I'm saving 1,000 people versus saving one. No one's going to do that. They're going to push the infant out. Why? Because the embryo is not the same thing as a born kid. And that's the thought experiment that you have to do. Now, I think yesterday was the anniversary where I had a discussion with somebody on Facebook where the person was absolutely had their mind blown. You can't freeze children. You can freeze the embryos. I was like, I bet you $10,000 that this is something that you can do. And he refused to believe that you could freeze embryos. And he was like, this is witchcraft. This is witchery. This is whatever. He just refused to believe that science can do this because these people don't understand how science works. But what happened? At the end of the conversation, I was like, look, if you don't understand how this works and how biology works, maybe you're not informed enough to be having any sort of debate on abortion. End of story. But if you want, that's on Facebook.com/LiberalDan. It's one of the pictures that I posted. I think I said it like, I will call this an argument with an idiot in blue, or argument with a conservative in blue, or something like that. Julie, if men could get pregnant, there would be abortion vending machines like a photo booth. Absolutely. It would be McBortions, or have it your way. Abort it your way. Or don't have it your way. That would be the slogan. Don't have it your way.
On women, what is it that you think will happen to women specifically if Roe v. Wade is, overturned? Let's act as though it's going to be overturned. I know it's a leak, but
I just think it just takes away that choice, and it just sucks.
But let me ask you, why do you think it takes away that choice? Like, what do you think happens when Roe v. Wade gets overturned?
And look, I'm not begrudging people who don't have a full grasp of everything that's going on politically. It's fine. But again, if he wants to have an honest debate with people, then he really should be picking out people who know how to debate these points. If these two people clearly made it seem like they weren't really up to speed with every single aspect that was going on with this particular incident. So why then are you continuing on the interview? You should then say, I'm looking for people who have an understanding of what's going on with the leaked ruling, and I would like to have a discussion about this. No, he's picking people where he knows that he has a better home field advantage.
I think this is something that a lot of people maybe are a little confused about.
It gives the states the choice to gives the states the choice to choose what they want to do. But I think I mean I may be wrong, but I think some states have already banned Plan B, something like that.
There was a rumor about I think it was Tennessee or Mississippi.
Yes.
There are people that do want to ban Plan B. There are people who have said that birth control is up next. There are people, because the ruling mentions things like Obergefell, Griswold v. Connecticut, I think even Lawrence v. Texas. It mentions a lot of other rulings, and Alito claims that just because it rules this way, that doesn't put those others at risk. But if you're ruling that Roe v. Wade was not founded correctly, was not a well-founded argument or a well-founded ruling, but it was based on Griswold, well then that puts Griswold at risk. And I mean, I think Obergefell v. Hodges, the one legalizing or requiring that states recognize gay marriage or not discriminate against marriage, that could very well also be at risk. But I think it's harder to put that at risk or make that argument, because you would have to convince the court, why should you now be able to invalidate all of these marriages that are already in existence? Whereas with Griswold, you could say, oh, well, the state should have the authority to say no birth control pills, no Plan B in my state, and that just affects people going forward. I disagree with doing either of them, obviously, but I think it's easier for them to overturn Griswold than it is for them to overturn, things like, Obergefell v. Hodges. And the thing is if you go after Griswold, if Griswold falls, then that creates a domino effect of any other ruling that was stemmed from Griswold. So there's that too that you have to take into consideration. They might want to go back and do that, and that might be their ultimate goal. It probably is their ultimate goal. They've said so much. These people who believe in no abortions without exception are people who believe that birth control pills are abortifacients when they're not. It used to be the idea. People used to think that birth control pills prevented fertilization, ovulation, or implantation. But recently there are studies, and one of the stories that I typically cited for this went behind a paywall, unfortunately. However, recent studies have shown no evidence that a birth control pill will prevent the implantation of a fertilized egg. So they only really work, the only evidence that exists is that a birth control pill prevents ovulation or fertilization, not implantation. So it can no longer be considered an abortifacient. However, Hobby Lobby was allowed to make that argument in the birth control mandate case, and they were able to say in court that we believe that birth control pills prevent implantation, and we're not required to prove that. And that's one of the biggest problems with the Hobby Lobby ruling, was that they were allowed to put a belief as fact. Now, if they, I'll have no problem with them saying, okay, well, we've proven that birth control pills prevent implantation, and as such, that is morally equivalent to us to an abortion, and that's why we shouldn't have to pay for these things. Then we'd have a whole other discussion based on who really pays for any benefit that you pay for, because in reality, as I said in my podcast before, if you work, you pay for all of the costs of employment, including every single bit of insurance or any other benefit that you get, just regardless of whether or not it's on your paycheck or not. You're paying for it with your labor. So they shouldn't be able to say that they're paying for it, because you're paying for it with your labor. But that's not really the topic of discussion. We're not really talking labor struggles and labor rights in this one, so let's not get too sidetracked. Let's see. Human embryo has been grown in a laboratory for twice the length of the time than it previously possible. Okay, but what's the point? It's still, if you have an embryo and it's frozen, like you have 100 of them in it, or 1,000 of them in a freezer, are you going to save the 1,000 Daily News, or are you going to save the one infant that you could save? Let's see. Eli Matoya, the whole argument of viability in abortions is a smokescreen. The fundamental aspects of this controversy is control of women and political power, refuse to raise money and get frozen. And see, I used to believe that conservatives really didn't want to ban abortion. I used to believe that conservatives just wanted to use the threat to ban abortion as a fundraising tool, that they want to be like, we need to fight these liberals on abortion, so send me money and I'll fight them. And then they really, at the end of the day, did not want to see abortion go away, because then they lose their talking point, they lose their argument. But the only reason that viability is relevant here is because that's what Roe deals with. Roe deals with viability because Roe deals with viability. That makes it applicable to this discussion, even though overall, in the overall abortion discussion, I agree with you that it should only be about body autonomy. No more, no less. Daily News, in the case of Dolly, they did not have to merge an egg with a sperm. In the case of Dolly, it was a created clone of the sheep. Let's see. Let's go back to the video.
Sound not like true. That. Okay.
It just means you have to get it from a doctor, not just get it, like, pick it up at a CVS.
Oh, not just pick it up at CVS. Yeah. I mean, I guess that makes sense, but yeah.
But it doesn't make sense. I mean, well, okay. I used to make the argument when I was younger that it didn't make sense to make Plan B over the counter when you couldn't get birth control pills over the counter, because Plan B was simply an increased dose of oral contraception, and as such it was counterintuitive to make the higher dose thing over the counter while the lower dose thing was only available by prescription only. Now, I made that argument to say that was in that argument I was thinking, well, the reason I'm making that argument is because birth control pills should be available over the counter as well to individuals who need them. But, but still, we've agreed that Plan B should be legal. So why are you going to ban it? And even in this case, even if you're just making it only available by prescription only, that's still reducing the availability for somebody to get one when they really need it, because you have to use Plan B really quickly or else it's not effective. There's also conditions you have to worry about, like if you're too heavy to use Plan B, that's also problematic. Let's continue.
Yeah. I mean, it just sucks. I don't really have much more than that. I just think...
But do you think that the states should have the right to be able to determine abortion laws? Because it won't change the laws in that's all Roe v. Wade overturning means that Colorado, can have abortion, like they have all the way up until 9 months, and Texas can have a heartbeat bill.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know yet. I guess we'll see what happens.
Well, that is what's going to happen, right? It's not like there won't be a federal ban on abortion. So it'll happen on a state level where states can place restrictions, which they weren't allowed to before. Yeah. And now it allows the states to place restrictions.
Yeah.
And that's based on people voting for that in each state, right?
Yeah, they're representatives. Yeah. I mean, the overturning of Roe v. Wade is the Supreme Court justices, obviously, so that's not a voting issue. You don't really vote them. They have lifetime appointments. But it's after that. Yeah, if the people of Texas want to have a limitation, or of Oklahoma, they can do it. And if the people of Colorado or Virginia or California don't want to, they don't have to.
Rather than federally?
Yeah, federally what happened with Roe v. Wade was basically, particularly in the first trimester, states were not allowed to place restrictions. Okay. And so recently, there was a bill there was a case that went up and challenged it. Where they said, well, we should have the right to, in this state, place restrictions in our state. And they said, yeah, Roe v. Wade is kind of bad law because there's no constitutional right to an abortion.
There you go. There's another problem. There's no constitutional right to an abortion. That doesn't matter because the 9th Amendment clearly states that the non-enumeration of... Let's see if I can bring this back up. Is that available here? Let's see. There we go. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights should not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Boom. There you go. I should put that on top for this one. Let's go ahead and put that up here. So we can always just click that on and say, there you go, 9th Amendment, whenever he makes the argument that abortion is not enumerated in the Constitution. Rights do not have to be enumerated in the Constitution in order for people to have them. Let's continue. Let's see. Okay, so the girls here are interviewing, seem a little bit uninformed. That's a lot of the problem. Yeah, and people are, I guess you could be as informed and not informed as you want, but the problem I have here is not that they don't know what the whole situation is that he's basically trying to pick people who are not informed to make him look like he's the smart guy and knows what he's talking about, and then so they can't fight back against what he's saying, so he looks like he has the better argument, when in reality he doesn't have the better argument. In reality, his argument sucks, and he doesn't understand things like the Constitution, because the Constitution doesn't require rights to be enumerated.
So it should be determined by the states.
Yeah. I mean, everybody has a different opinion, so, that's all. But we're going to go get some...
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
That's so random.
Sarah?
Sarah.
All right. Okay.
Selfie time with the
All right. So, Darian, we're just talking with people now. You know, there were these big protests here a few days ago.
Right.
So we didn't really want to get into that fray. You don't end up having very productive conversations. Have you've heard about the leak?
Hold on. Kim, Republicans will not be able to get away with making all that illegal, though. I think not, nor should they. God did not forbid birth control in the Bible, that I recall, maybe beyond the pill. Well, God didn't prohibit abortion in the Bible either. If you want to bring God into it, the only place in the Torah that discusses abortion is explaining how to do one, how to perform one, to determine whether or not somebody's wife had an affair. And the Torah also says that the embryo, the Torah also says that if two men strife and if the guy hits the pregnant woman and the pregnant woman miscarries, then there's a monetary fine that's to be assessed. But if there's damage to the pregnant person themselves, then it's charged an eye for an eye in the court. So what does that mean? That means that the fetus has less worth than the pregnant person carrying the fetus. That's what Jewish law says. I mean, I'm not a Christian, I'm not a Muslim, but apparently there's not much. The only religion that talks about abortion as much as they do is Christians. And for some reason they've decided to retcon the whole thing and make it so that abortions are somehow against God's law, when again there's no mention of abortion being a negative thing in the Torah.
Roe v. Wade being overturned.
Stephen just told me about it, actually. Okay. You know, I haven't been keeping up, but he was telling me about, you know, how some people are taking it as if they're just abolishing abortion.
Right. That's how. That's what a lot of the protests were. Yeah.
Right. But from what
and because it will be, because as soon as it happens in states with trigger laws, those trigger laws will trigger, and abortion will be illegal at least at some point during some durations in those states. In Mississippi, it'll be 15 weeks. In Texas, it'll be 6 weeks. In other places, it might be never. And there are other restrictions that are being placed on it. Like the Louisiana law would have charged the person obtaining an abortion with murder and had wording that would prevent things like in vitro fertilizations because it criminalized the destruction of, quote, human life upon fertilization. And if you fertilize, if you put the sperm and the egg together and you make the embryo, that's a human life. So discarding a human life, therefore, is murder. So if you try in vitro fertilization under the Louisiana law that was tried and it failed. Ironically, the Louisiana Right to Life organization was like, this is too far, we don't agree with this. And I'm like, Louisiana pro-lifers are against this law? Wow. And the guy who wrote the law was like, because he was like, I can't believe we're supposed to be a pro-life state. How can you be against this? We're supporting the embryo. Well, you're running the law in such a way that's going to criminalize the person already facing a tough decision, which even the Right to Life doesn't even want to do. They just want to punish the doctors. And B, you're making it so that people who can't get pregnant and want to via IVF can't do so, because by doing so, and if you discard any of those embryos, then that's murder, according to the Louisiana law. Daily News. The bottom line is medical procedures should be between physicians and their patient. Government should have no opinion. They could not possibly know what's best. Okay, we agree on that. It should be between the physician and the person who's pregnant. Government shouldn't be involved at all, with maybe the exception of making sure that any clinic where a medical procedure is being performed is a sterile, clean environment, where that's not a restriction on abortion clinics, that's a restriction on all clinics. So there's that.
Was saying that that's not the case.
Right.
So I'd like to get to know a little bit more information about that. But
okay. So we kind of have two separate.
No, he's somebody else who Crowder is interviewing who doesn't know as much about what's going on as Crowder does. Now, Crowder may misrepresent things, but Crowder knows more about this individual, so it's an unequal conversation at this point. So he's already starting off with the advantage, and as we've seen in the past too, he doesn't necessarily, he's not correctly giving them facts. He's giving them his slanted view or incorrect view of the facts.
Issues, I guess, sort of, and it doesn't really matter. We've addressed this. I don't know if you're pro-life or pro-choice.
It depends on how far along the pregnancy is.
Okay.
Yeah.
That relates exactly to Roe v. Wade. So Roe v. Wade basically was a case where they specifically barred states from setting any kind of limitations on abortion in the first trimester. And so some laws, like the Texas heartbeat law, or there was a case in Mississippi that went up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court just ruled that, you know what, states can determine their own abortion laws.
Okay.
So with Roe v. Wade being overturned, it does mean that some states can outright ban abortion if they want, or they can place limitations like, the heartbeat, which is well within the first trimester. And then a place like Colorado or Virginia or New Jersey, they can have their late-term abortion laws, which they have. They allow abortions well into the third trimester. It just makes it a scenario where it goes back to the states. They can determine their own laws regarding abortion limitations.
Right, okay.
So that's the fallout from it. What do you think about that?
I think states should have their own. I think states should have their own, depending on where you are.
There you go. This person went from I'm pro-choice, depending on to a certain point, to states should have their own law. So he's saying that states should be able to make their own laws, including times when before he believes that. And again, states shouldn't be able to legislate rights. Rights are not powers. States have powers, people have rights, and a state shouldn't be able to legislate away somebody's right. Now they do, but they shouldn't be able to.
But I don't see a problem with everyone being under one ideology as well. Like you said, depending on how far along the child is, I would say it's almost murder if the child is, alive and it's not just a fetus. And,
right.
But, early along in the pregnancy, I'm definitely pro-choice in regards to that.
Okay. When would you determine kind of
I'd say after the first trimester.
After the first trimester?
Yeah, I'd say after the first.
So after 12 weeks?
Correct.
Okay. What about, the fact, for example, that there is a heartbeat before that, that there's a separate heartbeat, so that's the basis for some of these laws, that if there's a separate heartbeat that you can't abort, or, the thing that, for example, the toes are developed or certain organs, so I wonder what changes, for example, from week 11 to week 12.
Right.
And this is a conversation that everyone has.
And for me, I don't know, when the baby, I would say this, because like you said, I don't know exactly when the heartbeat, starts, but I would say if the heartbeat if it's alive, I would say adoption would be, a better.
Nobody is required to be a broodmare for anybody else. Nobody should be. If somebody wants to choose to gestate and then offer up their child to somebody who's seeking an adoption, by all means, they should be able to be free to do so. But it's not the person's responsibility who's gestating to contribute to the national supply of infants that these conservatives have talked about. Let's see, Ethan Weber. Even though I'm pro-choice, I believe abortion is a sin, though, and a woman and man would need to repent for abortion before they could go to heaven. But committing abortion should not be murder. Look, I have no problem with that stance in that that's your beliefs, and as long as you're not trying to legislate those beliefs, fine. And you're free to proselytize those beliefs. First Amendment, you can share those beliefs that you have. If you want to convince people to try and not that they shouldn't be getting an abortion because you believe that they're going to be going to hell for all eternity because they had to make this decision, then even though it shouldn't be up to the sperm donor to decide whether or not it's going on, so I don't know how the sperm donor would be involved in her internal damnation with the ultimate decision. Although when my wife went to go get her tubes tied, or they suggested that they could tie the tubes after her second successful pregnancy, they told my wife that she would need to get permission from me, and I would have given permission, but she said no on principle. And I don't blame her for it, because that's some of that BS right there. But yeah, if you want to absolutely advocate for a position and try and encourage people to not have abortion, fine, do that. But as long as you're not trying to legislate it, and it doesn't seem like you're trying to legislate it, but I'll disagree that I don't think that. I'm Jewish, so Jewish people don't believe in hell. Jewish people don't believe in eternal damnation. Jewish people don't believe that abortion is a sin. So there you go.
A better choice as opposed to, taking a life.
Well, you get the heartbeat at 6 weeks, and then you get a more developed heart. It's like they say it's a tube, but the heart develops. And are you a dad at all? Do you have any kids?
Oh, yeah. I have 3. Yeah.
Okay, so did you ever do the ultrasound where you see the heartbeat?
Oh, yeah.
So that's well before the end of the first trimester.
You're actually right about that, yeah.
And did you feel like that was alive when you saw that heartbeat?
Yeah, exactly. I do.
Yeah, for me it was crazy. I was like, oh my gosh, I better not. I don't know about you, but I had twins. I was just paranoid, where I was like, all right, I just got to make sure you don't fall down the stairs.
Right,
exactly. Because there's nothing much you can do.
Exactly. It's a life you need to protect.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm all for that. So that's why I say first trimester, only because of my lacking of knowledge of when the heartbeat actually starts.
Okay. So then you would, in other words, before Roe v. Wade being overturned, a heartbeat bill would not be allowed because that's in the first trimester. But now with Roe v. Wade overturned, states can set a heartbeat bill. So you would say, okay, they should have the right to do that. A state.
I would say not after the heartbeat.
No, well that's what I'm saying. A state can set that limitation.
Yeah, I would say,
whereas right now they can't set that limitation.
I would agree with that.
Okay. So then, so it's pretty reasonable. Then it seems like, you're kind of like most Americans, where most Americans consider themselves pro-choice until a certain point.
Right.
It gets a little bit difficult when you ask Americans to define where that point is. Kind of like we just experienced now. But I do think that it's being a little misrepresented. If you've seen the protests, and I'm sure you probably might have been under the impression at one point that overturning Roe v. Wade was a ban on abortion.
Right.
Yeah, that's not the case. It just goes back to the states. Do you think that at the very least that's a reasonable decision for the court to make?
I think that is a reasonable decision. Yeah.
Okay, that's about it. Yeah, and I think you agree with most Americans. And I think if you take the time to do, like you said, a little more research on it, don't take my word for it. I promise you I'm not lying, but I encourage you to assume that I am lying. Make sure you talk with other people about it, because the more people know what Roe v. Wade is, and that it goes to the states, then we'll have less division in this country, as opposed to yelling about banning abortion and it not being, my body, my choice all the way up until 9 months. I mean, let me ask you this, because the most radical abortion bills that they would consider, on those on the left, would be things like the heartbeat bill that exists right now, or like the Mississippi law. But in states like Colorado, or places like Virginia, they can abort all the way up to 9 months.
Oh, wow.
What do you think is, let's say we take the extreme, abortion all the way up until 9 months, or a complete ban?
But again, who's aborting up to 9 months? That's not what by leaving that information out. By leaving out who is aborting up to 9 months, he's presenting the argument in a dishonest way. By not saying that, only 1% of the people who abort do so after 21 weeks, and those that do so are only doing so because of life issues, health issues, or fetal abnormalities. He's not bringing that up because he knows that's a losing argument. He knows that this individual who's just agreed with him, who's just convinced to agree with him, he knows that this person would be like, well, yeah, if the person who's pregnant is going to die, then that person should be able to have an abortion even in the third trimester, and then that completely nukes Crowder's case. So he's never going to bring that up. He's never going to bring up something that's going to hurt his position, even though not doing so means he's being somewhat dishonest about it.
What would you be more comfortable with? Because one is already happening, abortion up till 9 months. It's happening right now. The ban doesn't exist.
Like, I'm pro-life, so I would say a complete ban over all the way up to 9 months. If I have to choose an extreme,
you would choose the ban.
I would choose the ban.
I think that's not a poll that's out there. I think probably a lot of Americans would feel that way. We're not there.
That's not a poll that's out there. But that's a thing that he thinks that's the thing that Americans would believe in. What is that audio?
We don't care about evidence.
There you go. We don't care about evidence. I know I wasn't going to have much in the form of bits for this thing, but I think I might have to have that one handy because I don't know if this poll actually exists, but I think that maybe the people might agree with that.
We don't care about it. We don't care about evidence.
There we go. So let's continue.
Not what we have to decide.
Right.
But the truth is, a lot of people don't know that right now this happens in many states.
Right.
I mean, there are some states, I don't know if you're aware of, it was Elizabeth Warren, Klobuchar, a few Democrats voted against the Infants Born Alive Act. And what was happening in places like, I believe, Illinois, Virginia, I don't know the exact states, babies that survived abortions were being left to die.
And he's using town hall as this. Town hall is not a legitimate source. The idea that town hall was going to be presenting the argument correctly that this is really going on. No, you need to present a legitimate source, but it wasn't happening.
And the bill just demanded that babies that survived abortions just be legally required the same medical attention that all babies are given, as opposed to just because you don't want them, but they already survived the abortion, they've come out of the birth canal. And there were a lot of Democrats who voted against that.
Really?
Because they thought that was infringing on abortion rights.
That's not right, man. Not right. They do deserve the same treatment. Now, are there any birth defects that go along with surviving?
Not necessarily, no. It's just if a baby survived an abortion that, they attempted to abort and the baby survived it, there were instances where they weren't being given medical care.
That's not right.
Yeah, there's actually, you can watch an interview with the governor of Virginia saying that what would happen in that instance is we would keep the baby comfortable and then have a discussion with the mother as to what she wants to do.
Right.
Meaning you could still let that baby die. And that's happening today. So in my opinion, that's more extreme than the overturning of Roe v. Wade, which just gives it back to the states.
Right.
Because they'll still be able to do that in Virginia.
Right.
As sick as it is to me, but they'll still be able to do it.
Yeah, that is sick.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah, it's sick.
Turns your stomach.
Yeah, that is. Especially as a father.
How old are your little ones?
I have 10, 12, and 4.
10, 12, and 4?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're spaced out there. So
yeah.
I was gonna say you're not looking to an empty nest for a while with that 4-year-old.
No.
One of them will be telling you he hates you or she hates you, while the other one still thinks you're the best. You know, so
right.
balance your self-esteem.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Darren. I appreciate it, man.
Zach.
Hello. Hey. All right. You got 5 minutes to talk?
Yes, I'm sure.
Great. What's your name?
Casey.
Casey. All right, Casey. Well, that ties in perfectly because we're talking about all these protests there a couple days ago here about the Roe v. Wade situation.
Sure, absolutely.
Have you been following that?
Yes.
Okay. So, first let me ask you, you consider yourself pro-choice, pro-life, pro-choice with limitations? How would you define your view?
I'm definitely pro-choice.
Okay.
You know, I'm definitely pro-choice.
Okay. What's your opinion on it's a leak right now, obviously.
Sure.
But if it's true, the overturning of Roe v. Wade?
It's ridiculous, you know. As a woman, I think it's astronomical how we could consider, and no offense to you, but how a heterosexual male can tell me what I should and should not do with my body, and what that actually means. I think there's so many stipulations that go into this. You know, there's a lot of circumstances, and just so you know, I was told I couldn't have children.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. But so this topic is like super sensitive to me and of course to my family. But I know
because you wouldn't need to have an abortion.
I wouldn't need to have one, but let's just say the opportunity ever arose itself. There's all kind of medical conditions and reasons, topical pregnancies, tubal pregnancies, things that have happened to your body that require abortions for medical reasons for us as women to like literally live and survive. So for you to say you're forcing me to either go through that experience and or heaven forbid, you know, my kid is, you know, there's all kind of testing that goes on early in your pregnancy.
Sure.
And they'll let you know that there's fluid on the brain for a baby or something like that, and they do not recommend you continuing on with that pregnancy. I'm also 31, and so a lot of us are getting pregnant later in life. So sometimes that's an issue, right? And it could be a health risk for the mother and the baby. So whatever your reasoning is, more importantly, you could just be 18 and decide that that's not the decision that you want to make today and you're not comfortable with that. You could be a victim of rape. I don't care what your reasoning is. I think it's 100% your choice to decide.
So none of those other things matter then? We could have just eliminated all that.
Yeah.
Just you think people should really get an abortion for whatever reason?
I think you should be able to make any decision as far as HIPAA laws are concerned for yourself and your body at any time.
So what is your, because a lot of people have different interpretations or understandings of what the overturning of Roe v. Wade is.
Actually means?
Yeah. What is your interpretation of what would happen if Roe v. Wade is overturned?
My interpretation is that it doesn't matter what your reasoning is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that abortions will now be illegal or released in the state of Texas for anybody.
No.
Correct me.
No, it's not. No, it's and that's it. It just gives the right to states to make their own laws regarding abortion restrictions.
Sure.
So Colorado, you know, New Jersey, Virginia, California, the states that have abortion laws all the way up until and including 9 months, they can still do that.
So let me ask you a question. Do you think Texas is going to vote in which direction?
Well, I don't want to get. I'll get into my opinion in a second.
I think he just lied here.
But I want
another example of him being dishonest, because she said here in Texas that if Roe v. Wade is overturned, that abortions become illegal in Texas. He said no, it just gives Texas the option to ban abortions if they want to regulate abortions as they want. So let's see. What is Texas' trigger law? Texas trigger law would outlaw abortions in Texas if the Supreme Court reverses Roe v. Wade. The Texas trigger law would take place 30 days after Roe v. Wade is overturned and would make performing an abortion in Texas a crime. Doctors could face life imprisonment and fines up to $100,000. On top of that, the anti-abortion advocate said the goal is to add civil penalties to the law. Texas won't be the only state banning abortion. So there you go. Texas is a state with a trigger law. So therefore, Steven Crowder either, again, and maybe I misspoke, maybe he didn't lie, maybe he just doesn't know, but I'm inclined to believe that he knows. So I think it's more likely than not that he just lied to this person, but even if he at least told a non-truth to this person. Let's continue.
to sort of discuss the issue of whether we agree on the fact that it's good or bad law. So it's not banning abortion. It puts it back to the states.
I don't agree with that.
Okay. So what do you think should happen? Do you think there should be a federal, it should be enshrined into federal law that abortion is a constitutional right?
I think it took a long time for Roe versus Wade to even become about and to pass. And that if we aren't careful, history will continue to repeat itself over and over again. So the fact that that law is what it is, I don't know why we're going back and trying to now tweak that. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, are you, and forgive me, this is not meant to be a gotcha at all. Law is complicated, and Roe v. Wade is complicated. You know, that's why you had Roe v. Wade, then you had Planned Parenthood versus Casey, and these. It's always been a complex issue.
And I'm Casey.
Yes, exactly. See, we tie that's called a callback. But Roe v. Wade, the issue was right. Roe v. Wade was sort of under the guise. It was settled under the guise of the 14th Amendment, the Due Process Clause.
Okay.
So there's no constitutional right to an abortion.
Okay.
And it's interesting because you just mentioned sort of the HIPAA laws. And the idea was that under the Due Process Clause, there's a right to privacy, which also isn't necessarily a constitutional right. But under the Due Process Clause,
it's not a constitutional right. Let's bring this up there. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights should not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So therefore, it doesn't have to be enumerated to be a right. Meanwhile, privacy, there are plenty of laws that do protect privacy, so you would have to argue at least there's an implied right to privacy because of all the other laws. But even if it's not implied, you still have the right to privacy. You shouldn't be able to have the right to privacy unless government can prove why it has a reason to act and make you be less private.
That a woman had that right to privacy with her doctor and allowed states to set limitations only after the first trimester. So it banned states setting limitations within the first trimester.
Absolutely, okay.
And then you have states that, for example, have had like a heartbeat pill, things that occur before the second trimester. That kind of kicked it up to the Supreme Court, and they looked at it, and this is something that even Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, where they said, you know what, this is just sort of bad law, so it has to go back to the states.
Okay.
So that was the basis for Roe v. Wade. Does that change your opinion at all that there's no constitutional right to an abortion?
Not necessarily, because when we talk about first trimester, I think I also don't agree that after your first trimester you should be looking at options as far as abortion, right? Because at this point, your fetus is a full-grown fetus. You know, there's things that are happening, your baby's developing. So I understand up until that point.
Okay.
But on a state-to-state basis or a federal basis, to me, I guess in that first trimester, it's still up to me and my doctor.
So it sounds to me like you're saying you do support eliminating abortion as an option after the first trimester.
I do. I agree with that.
Okay. What changes, for example, from week 11 to week 12 that makes it no longer acceptable?
Eyeballs, fingers, toes, hair. I mean, you know, you're going from this small cell. I mean,
But that happens before the second trimester.
Well, but the thing is, why is Plan B a thing, right? There's a reason why day after something, you can go into CVS right now and a young lady can say, I know I did whatever I did last night and I'm going to make sure that I protect myself.
So did what I did. I'm assuming sex.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so to me, you saying, okay, here at this point in time, there's...
Hold on. Daily News, you mentioned at the top of the show there are states. That's why I asked what states. Okay. So according to this graphic that I'm looking at right now, the states that currently have trigger laws are Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, South Dakota, North Dakota, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Texas, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Kentucky. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 13 states currently have trigger laws on the books that will automatically make abortion illegal in at least some circumstance, with some prohibition that Roe v. Wade covered and would previously had made illegal, i.e. going back into the first trimester. Now, Florida, Indiana, Nebraska, Montana are likely states to implement bans. And then there are Arizona, Idaho, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, West Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama are all states that they believe are certain that they will ban abortion. But those aren't trigger laws. 13 states have trigger laws. So there you go. Over 20% of this country would immediately have abortion bans that come into play simply because Roe versus Wade is overturned. See, what about Alabama? Alabama is one of those states certain to ban abortion. So where it's a red state, it's with a red governor, red legislature, not enough, lots of gerrymandering, I'm sure for certain, that would, probably give undue say on top of that to make sure that, they can have their way. But, it's one of those, it will happen because Roe v. Wade doesn't exist, but it's not a trigger law. So it's dishonest of people to say that Roe v. Wade the overturning of Roe v. Wade doesn't immediately ban abortions, because it does, because states have trigger laws that are set up to do that. I think one of the constitutional amendments that Louisiana passed specifically said this does not take effect unless Roe v. Wade is overturned. So there you go. If I had my dashboard, I would, on Blog Talk Radio, I would say, doing the Trump, it is what it is, but I don't. So all I have is the evidence one right now. I could probably look up it is what it is, see if I can find it.
People who I'm not a doctor, right, obviously. I wouldn't be wearing this.
Spoiler alert, neither am I. Yeah. I don't know if you can tell.
So, somebody somewhere sat down and said, this makes sense, who gets paid a lot more money than me and understands the anatomy of the human body. But yeah, no, I don't.
But that's kind of the issue, though, right? Is no one has sit down and said it made sense. For example, in a place like Colorado, you can have an abortion all the way up until 8-9 months.
Yeah, no, I don't agree with that.
Okay. And that'll still be the law in Colorado. Sure. And in Virginia, you had the governor where there were babies who survived abortions, and they were still being allowed to die because technically they had tried to abort them. They'll still be allowed to do that in Virginia.
Well, what's the difference between that and some girl throwing herself down the stairs? People are going to do what they want to do when they want to do it.
Well, no, this is about babies who were born who survived abortions, and they were just leaving it in a room to die.
Sure, but you're saying in Colorado at 8 months, it's still legal for them to get abortions, which I didn't know. That's what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, so if a lady's 8 months pregnant and she's just in dire whatever mental state and she decides she doesn't want to have that kid, what is to stop her from jumping off the top of this building and or pushing herself down the stairs?
Well, I don't know. Hopefully there'd be some bars on the window.
We don't know.
We don't know.
Right.
But I'm just trying to understand your position, because it's something that's obviously a heated issue, and I'm trying to see where there is common ground. It sounded to me like you were saying after the second trimester, no abortion, but now it sounds like you're saying, yeah, it should be fine for a place like Colorado to have abortions at 7-8 months.
No, I'm not saying that at all.
Okay.
I literally said I do not agree with that.
Okay, so you still think...
But what I don't think is that we should go so far back that we're saying every state should make their own opinion before the first trimester, after the second trimester, because to me, I live in Texas, I'm originally from California, and I know we vote very differently between
I hope that you're not one of those who comes from California and brings your politics here, because you left for a reason, right?
I didn't leave by choice. My parents brought me here.
Oh, okay.
So I think views are going to very much differ in living in the Bible Belt. I've seen, how that can affect people. I've seen how it affects me as a black person, 112%. So
how so? What's the 12?
What's the 12%?
Yeah. What's the 12 past 100?
I literally went to a restaurant when I was 8 years old, and they told my cheerleading coach that I couldn't go into their restaurant because I was black, and that was in Texas, and it would never happen in California. So there's just things that
it definitely happens in California.
Okay.
Okay.
I appreciate talking to you.
Happens in California.
This is really fun.
Okay. You were saying no racists in California? Come on, there's no way. Ever been to Venice? I've seen some. I lived in California too. I've definitely seen. I've seen racists everywhere. Yeah, definitely some neo-Nazis in California. Thank you.
He could again get disadvantaged because he again that's in fact try and get it to the point where he can get the advantage of the conversation.
Wasn't there a movie like American History X or something? Was that Longview, Texas?
I don't know the.
Maybe Tyler.
It's a really nasty way.
Have you been following this, the Roe v. Wade situation? All right. Can I ask you about it? Because we're just talking with people that have... Because there were these protests here all across this lawn a couple days ago. And that's why we didn't ask people there, because it was pretty heated, and you don't really end up having good conversations. I'm Steven, by the way.
Hi, I'm Tammy.
Tammy?
Yes.
Is that spelled with a Y or not?
Y.
Okay. So, Tammy, you said that you're pro-choice.
Yes.
Okay. Have you been following you haven't been following the Roe v. Wade situation?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is your opinion on, it's a leak, but alleged, but it seems like it's very likely that the court will overturn Roe v. Wade. What's your opinion on that? From your perspective as someone who's pro-choice, from what I understand, but specifically on this kind of piece of law.
I hope they don't revoke the entire Roe versus Wade legislation.
Okay.
I just hope that they make whatever current modifications they need to for, 2020 and to the future,
So I don't know, a lot of people are, because it gets confusing, right, with some of the Supreme Court and law and precedent, what happens with Roe v. Wade, a lot of people think that means there's a ban on abortion. It doesn't. What it means if it gets...
It does. Again, we've gone over this.
Overturned is it goes back to states. So the states can place restrictions, or a state can ban abortion if they want.
And 13 states have trigger laws.
And then states like Colorado, like New Jersey, like California that have abortions, all the way up until 9 months can still do that, but it's on a state-by-state basis. What do you think about that, considering that that's what would happen?
I hope the local, state legislation, they will weigh both sides, the pro-choice and the pro-life.
Yeah.
And when I vote, I'll vote pro-choice.
Okay, you vote pro-choice, but do you think it's at least a reasonable decision to say states should have the right to decide?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so you're not against the overturning of it, but you would like in your state for there to be access to abortion?
Yes,
Okay, that seems to be a lot of people, most people, but the media sort of framed it as though it's an outright ban on abortion, right? Which scares people, and it's not really...
What media is presented, again, he's lying, because I have not seen any media that says it's an outright ban on abortion just because Roe versus Wade is overturned. The media is correctly saying that there are states with trigger laws that will immediately ban abortion. Certain states will have those things. But again, he is being dishonest about what's going on with what the media is saying. I've not seen any media say abortion will be illegal from sea to shining sea because Roe v. Wade is overturned. So that's absurd. Another one of his being false.
What happens? But let me ask you this. You're pro-choice. If you were to vote in your state, should there be any limitations on abortion at all? Where do we draw that line, let's say in Texas? What would you like to see if you could wave your magic wand and have any type of laws?
Well, what I would like to see is the medical community work with the families and help them to make those decisions. It's a private health decision, and so I hope that they will seek counsel from their medical providers.
Do you believe that there's a cutoff as far as abortion, where it should no longer be allowed?
Yes,
Okay.
Yes, I think the doctors can help.
Well, when do you think that should be, though? For example, so it sounds to me like you're not supporting, for example, states that have abortion up until and including 9 months. Does that seem? Yeah, that seems too far.
Yeah, that's too far.
Okay, let's just bring this up real quick. The vast majority of abortions occur early in pregnancy, according to KFF, Kaiser Foundation, Figure 1. 91% of abortions take place less than 13 weeks of gestational age. 8% of abortions take place between weeks 14 and 20, and 1% takes place 21 or greater weeks. So the idea that, these abortions are taking place in the third trimester are, most of them are not. And those that do take place in that 21 weeks and beyond are abortions that are being taken place not because they just don't want to have the kid, but because they want to have the kid, but they're being faced with a tragic life decision. So again,
unless, like I said, it's case by case, medical case by case, and unless something is wrong with the fetus and the doctor has already determined that something has to happen.
Yeah. Which is very rare, obviously, and they usually catch that well before 9 months. There's no medical reason for a 9-month abortion or 8-month or 7-month. So if you're living in Texas, where would you like to see that line drawn? Because different states will be able to establish their different laws. Would you?
There's no medical reason for a 7-month abortion. That is just false. There's cases where you determine fetal abnormalities that take place, where the fetus would either already be dead or will die immediately after birth. Those situations sometimes are not determined until later on in the pregnancy, and you should not be forcing anybody to gestate beyond any point where that would happen, where they would have to gestate for 2-3 extra months knowing that they wanted the child, but yet they can't have the child because there's a fetal abnormality. Let the person deal with it and deal with it as quickly as possible so that they don't have to sit there and be pregnant thinking about the fact that they're going to give birth to something that's either going to be dead or that will die immediately. That's just, it's shameful. It's abhorrent.
Like it to be, no abortions after the first trimester, second trimester, heartbeat. Where should the line be drawn for general abortions?
Again, I say just, I think you should seek help with your medical provider and let your OBGYN specialist assist you with making those decisions.
Okay.
Yeah,
So no limitations at the state level?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great job,
all right. In Texas?
In Texas.
All right, well, there you go. I appreciate it. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Hey. So,
all right, what's your name?
I'm Bella. Nice to meet you.
Bella, nice to meet you, Bella. That's a pretty name. Until Thorne had to ruin it for everybody.
Yeah, I know, right? Oh my gosh.
So, Bella, are you familiar with it? Have you been following the Roe v. Wade?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So let me ask you the first question. What do you think about the fact that it was leaked?
Well, I think that in itself is very scary because the privacy leak.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand how something like that could have happened.
Right.
If that makes sense.
It is pretty scary
Yeah.
and unprecedented. I mean,
odd.
Yeah. The court is sort of supposed to be immune from that.
Yeah.
Okay. So
it's not unprecedented. There have been cases where rulings have been leaked. So let's just, again, another dishonest statement by Crowder.
Your opinion on the assuming that it's all correct and it's been mostly confirmed, the overturning of Roe v. Wade?
To answer your question just very simply, I just don't understand the whole debate. Whereas, like women should just be able to govern their own bodies.
Okay.
Well,
that's a different conversation, right? It's like where life begins and if it's your body or not.
Right.
It's not a different conversation. It's the same conversation. I mean, autonomy is central to this discussion of whether or not states should be able to ban abortions or not.
Before we get to that, we can talk about that if you'd like to. But I'd like to sort of talk, because a lot of people don't really know what overturning Roe v. Wade means.
Yeah.
And that's by design from the media. They've obfuscated, made it complicated. What is your impression of what happens if Roe v. Wade is overturned?
Well, from what I've understood, isn't it correct that the whole thing is about, like, the document was leaked and it had a decision regarding how women's bodies should be governed? Isn't that correct?
No, so basically just, Roe v. Wade, I don't know if, let's go back to kind of Roe v. Wade when it happened. Roe v. Wade, well, there's no constitutional right to an abortion.
Right.
It was
that's right.
It's sort of predicated under the 14th Amendment, the Due Process Clause, which they interpreted as a right to privacy, and so women with their doctor. And all Roe v. Wade really, what it did was it said that states could not place any restrictions on pregnancies or on abortions in the first trimester. All that happens is if it gets overturned is that changes where it goes on a state-by-state basis. So California can make their own law, Texas can make their own law. So if you want to have abortion all the way up until third trimester, 8 months like some states, 9 months like some states, they can do it. And a place like Texas would legally be allowed to have like a heartbeat pill.
And let's be clear about this. He's only talking about the first trimester. He says that states cannot prohibit abortions at all during the first trimester, but he's kind of making it seem like it's okay after that. No. The Roe versus Wade made it so that during the second trimester, government could require reasonable health regulations. Now, what is the definition of reasonable? I don't know, but there are restrictions on states in the second trimester under Roe v. Wade. So let's just be clear about that. He is, again, not totally, he's, lies by omission, I guess, in this case.
Right. Yeah, I think it is difficult to determine all of that, but at the same time, I just think that.
But going back to the states,
I think it's odd if we're leaving the choice up to states to make that decision. If that makes sense. I feel like holistically, it should just be legal.
Okay. Well, what it's just saying is, it's not illegal federally.
Right.
And states can place restrictions if they want.
Right.
So, there are a lot of things, right, the way like states do. Property taxes, the way you do your education, for example, if you need just public schools, some states have more agreements with charter schools. So, this is just another example of it going to states' rights. Does that, I guess the question is, considering, there were protests.
No such thing as states' rights. States have powers. People have rights.
here and across the country that have gotten violent and outside of the Supreme Court justices' houses, which I think we agree on. The leak is a bad thing. The doxing is a bad thing.
Yeah, it's really
Do
bad.
we really think that the end result of overturning it is that extreme that it warrants that kind of a reaction? It's not a ban on abortion.
Yeah, it's not a ban on abortion. I'm sorry if I sound redundant, but I think the whole premise, I think the whole thing is just silly when we're like talking about what women can and can't do with their bodies and their choices.
Yeah. Well, then that gets to the idea. It's not really agreed upon.
Yeah.
Right. Now, if we want to get to that conversation, we can have that conversation. I'll tell you, I am pro-life.
Yeah.
Just so you know, I think that Roe v. Wade is bad law. And there are a lot of, even Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, it really wasn't a good ruling because there's no constitutional right to an abortion. She said she thought that at some point it would probably be undone. So that's a separate issue, people protesting sort of the changing of the law. On the issue of what women do with their own bodies, and this is why it goes to states, can you at least understand, because I can understand why you would say that. I can understand the argument. Can you understand why someone else, and particularly states and their legislatures, might say, okay.
Let's be clear. Ruth Bader Ginsburg had problems with Roe not because she felt it was vulnerable. She felt that Roe versus Wade was vulnerable to attacks. It wasn't. She thinks it should have been more strongly written. She wasn't opposed to the rights to an abortion. She just believed it had weaknesses in it, so that it could be taken down. And turns out she was right. It did have weaknesses, especially when you have a president who was able to steal 2 or 3 Supreme Court nominations. You could make an argument for that it's only 2, but I would say he shouldn't have had any. But because if the rules were you can't have an election, you can't have a Supreme Court nomination in the last year of a presidency or in an election year, then you shouldn't have been able to nominate Amy Coney Barrett. But he did anyway, so hypocrites.
But when there's another heartbeat, it's not your own body. When there's another pair of eyes, fingers, toes, it's not your own body, and they have...
But it's still using your body, and therefore you have the right to determine who uses your body or not.
The right, as they do in other state issues, to determine what limitations there are. Can you understand why people think it's very different from any other issue and that they don't believe it's your body when there's another body?
I understand that perspective because at that point when you start to have a heartbeat at a certain period of time, it does become another person involved.
Okay.
Because developmentally, right? But I think I do agree with the fact that there should be at least some kind of cutoff point. But the whole thing with
when do you think that cutoff should be?
I mean, I feel like if there isn't a cutoff, then at that point it's just kind of like, well, you had a long time to decide whether or not this was going to be the choice for you.
But again, nobody's bringing up, because nobody has the facts in front of them, and Crowder is clearly not going to bring this up, that only 1% takes place after week 21. So, again, most people would probably say after 21 weeks, you should have made up your mind already. After 21 weeks, people have made up their mind. After 21 weeks, the only people getting abortions are the people who are doing so because of necessity, not because of choice.
Right.
So I can't give you an exact number, but I feel like at least before the fetus is fully, or at least partially fully formed, I feel like that would be a reasonable.
That'd be reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is what most states will be doing.
Yeah.
Can I ask you?
No, because again, Roe versus Wade did not prevent states from regulating third trimester abortions. So eliminating Roe versus Wade doesn't stop states from setting that third trimester line. Eliminating Roe versus Wade allows them to draw the line way earlier. So again, Crowder's being dishonest here. The states that want to ban third trimester abortions already can do so under Roe versus Wade.
And this is just, hey, Lane, can I grab this from you? Just because this is also, I think this might help with Americans, because a lot of people, so let me kind of give you an example, right? In Colorado, for example, and in Virginia, they can do abortions all the way up to here.
Yeah.
Texas says not after here, right? A heartbeat, Bill.
All right. So let's look at this thing real quick. Let's look at this fetal development chart that he's using. I haven't been able to necessarily find a link to this chart online. I have not been able to find a link to this chart online. And, you know, I mean, I could put in, like, you know, Steven Crowder fetal development chart. I would love to be able to find it, because if I was able to find it, I would be able to show what is so wrong with it. Oh, I found a version. Oh, I think I found it. There you go. It's not the same colors. Open image in new tab. Hey, I did the search right. Imagine that. It's like I'm a pro at software or something. So this is what he's looking at, as you can see. And if you don't believe me, look. You see these little circles there going into what looks like a fetus, and you see this right here, and then you have these other things right here, or whatever. It's not the exact same thing, but it's close. They're not using the same. This one that Steven is using seems to be more seems to be a little bit more fancy graphic wise than. Let's see if we can. Oh, I think I found. There it is. I found the exact one. Never mind. I'm better than I thought I was. Save. Open image in new tab. Let's close that one out. Let's bring this one up. As you can see the font, see the colors, the teal, the purple, the blue. This is what Steven Crowder is looking at. Now, here, so look at these laws. So all right, so you have this week 1, week 2, week 3, all these weeks that are in here. Week 6, week 7, week 8, week 9, week 10. All right. So see, this is 10 weeks of development. Gestation is 40 weeks. So if you have a chart that's trying to show the fetal development accurately, 20 weeks should be in the middle. It should be, I turned off the, you can't see the cursor, but it should be in the middle. 20 weeks is not in the middle. You get to the middle, that's 9 and 10 weeks is the middle of the chart. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. There's 18 columns. So 9 would be halfway through. So right there between 9 and 10, although 40 is a little smaller. So right there at 9 is the middle of the column. So Crowder is using this chart, and this chart is just ultimately dishonest when it comes to trying to argue, because this is what he gets to do with this chart. He gets to point at 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 9 weeks, where it says, you know, in this one, heart is right there between 8, 9, and 10 weeks. So right at 9, it's where the heart is, quote, developed, even though there are studies, there's research that shows that the human heart does not fully form with all the musculature around it that would enable it to work outside of the uterus until like week 20, right? But here you go. You have they'll say 6 weeks. So it says highly sensitive period in there in the first trimester. And even if you look at the bottom, first trimester takes up more space than second and third trimester combined. This is just bizarre that anybody would think. I haven't seen this whole video. I did see the part of this with this chart, but this is just extreme dishonesty. You know, the chart in and of itself says, okay, highly sensitive period, you know, when it comes to certain things. I guess, I don't know what I guess when it comes to, I guess, brain and other parts of the central nervous system, highly sensitive period, and then it starts, okay, here's when this starts developing. Highly sensitive period for the heart, that's when that starts developing. So I think upper limbs, eyes, lower limbs, so each of the rows seem to represent development of certain parts of the fetal anatomy. So ears don't come into place until 11 to 14. External genitalia don't come into place until maybe 15. The palate, weeks 11 to 14. The teeth start at 11 to 14 and go all the way up to week 40. Lower limbs, etc. But the heart is the example that he's using, so we're going to focus on that one. The heart is a highly sensitive period between 5.5, 6 weeks till about 8 to 9 weeks, but then between 9 and 10 is when the heart is said to be fully formed. So this one isn't, according to what I've looked up, it's not completely true because the heart doesn't have that musculature around it until week 20, unlike other mammals. But I'm fine with just saying, okay, they don't, maybe they didn't know that, maybe they didn't just include that in this chart. But so he then now gets to take this chart, and I'm sure he used this chart on purpose. He now gets to take this chart, and he gets to point in the middle of the chart and say, this is where the heart begins. This is where the heart is developed. We have a heart here, it's developed here, and look, it's right in the middle of the chart. And he's talking to people and doing so in a way, and probably nobody is going to, most people won't just simply go, there's a problem with this chart, because I think most people want to believe, if they don't know who Steven Crowder is, most people want to believe that if you're coming to me to have a discussion about the issues, that you're going to come in with clean hands. You're going to come in as an honest debater. You're going to come in as somebody who wants to have this discussion honestly and debate the facts. So they might not sit here and question whether or not this chart is a valid chart to use or not, whether or not this chart gives an accurate representation of fetal development in the timeline that takes place during fetal development. So, again, so you get to point in the middle of the chart and say, here's the middle of pregnancy, the heart comes in. At which point the people will go, oh, well, the heart's being formed in the middle of pregnancy, so clearly in the middle of pregnancy, the person shouldn't be able to abort. Well, the middle of pregnancy isn't, or the second half of pregnancy isn't week 9 and week 10, as this chart represents it. The second half of pregnancy is in the middle of 19 to 22, starting at 21. First half would be week 0 to 20, then 21 and beyond would be that. And we all know, as we saw in the chart that I showed you earlier, abortions that take place week 21 beyond are only 1%. So, clearly here, and I would, if Daily News is still here, Daily News, are you still here? Do you believe, I would ask you this question, do you believe that this chart is an honest representation of fetal development in the way, and especially in the way that Steven Crowder is using it? Or do you believe that presenting this chart and trying to make a point in the middle of the chart to say this is where the heart develops is more of an emotional ploy trying to manipulate people? Because clearly, I mean, each column is a week until you get to 11 to 14. Then it's 4 weeks. 11, 12, 13, 14. Then it's 4 weeks. Then it's 4 weeks. Then it's 4 weeks, 4 weeks, 4 weeks, 4 weeks, and then 1 week. Or maybe 5 weeks at the last couple ones. The last one is 5 weeks, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39. Then the last one is a smaller column that's 40. So it's just another tactic that he's using to try and take advantage of people who might just be giving him the benefit of the doubt. They might be saying, hey, I don't know who this guy is. I mean, if I saw him, the moment that I saw this picture, the moment that I saw that he was using this image, I saw that it was a terrible image, because he's pointing in the middle of the chart to say where the heartbeat begins. Well, the heartbeat begins, if you were really being honest about it, it's only, or where the heartbeat begins is only that part where they're trying to ban abortion, like in Texas at 6 weeks. That part should be way to the left of this chart. And then if you then use that sort of chart to say, oh, well, now you're pointing all the way to the left here, that's very early in the pregnancy, no, I disagree with it. So he's trying to make an appeal to these people's emotions that, oh, these liberals are terrible, they want abortions in the middle of the pregnancy. No, it's only the first 6 weeks. So Let's see. Daily News. No, I'm looking, Daily News, for you to be able to say, for you to criticize this person, criticize the use of this chart, to say that using this chart is dishonest because it represents heart development in the middle of the pregnancy, when in reality, it's way earlier. It's making it look like weeks 1, 2, and 3 are the same things as weeks 15 to 18, 19 to 22, 23 to 26. That's what I want you to say. That's what I want to say or see. But again, we found the chart. I'm glad we found the chart, but this is clearly a horrible chart to use because it's trying to make a ploy on these people's emotions.
About this area, where do you think the cutoff should be?
Well,
and this shows you kind of where things have developed and what has developed.
I mean, it is a good question, but...
It's not a good question because it's a horrible chart.
It's hard to say. I mean, it definitely shouldn't be anywhere over here.
Okay. Daily News says, I'm feeding into Carter's argument, what's on the table is autonomy pure and simple. No, what's on the chart it's manipulating the person who's looking at it without that person being able to take a look at it and say, okay, this is what this chart is doing. Now, I'm suspicious of Crowder and anything that he does, because so I automatically come into the table assuming that he doesn't have clean hands. I'm going to look for what's wrong with this image. Why would he be using this image over another image? And he's using this one clearly because it puts the heartbeat in the middle of the pregnancy instead of early on in the pregnancy. So if he would have used a chart that said, okay, I think abortion should be, Texas wants to ban abortion over here, and it would be like in the first segment of the chart and not halfway through, I think she would be having a much different reaction, because on looking at this chart initially, she probably doesn't realize how dishonest the chart is, how the chart goes week, and then weeks. So, I mean, I think it's dishonest, and I would hope that other people would see why using that chart, and especially in the way that he's using it, is dishonest.
But...
And remember, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please remember to subscribe to the channel and like the video if you haven't done so already.
I mean, I would say at least over here, probably.
Okay.
I would imagine.
So that still includes the first trimester.
Yeah.
Which Roe v. Wade said you couldn't place restrictions right there at week 11 and 12.
Yeah.
And that's what was sort of brought. That's what was brought to the Supreme Court, because there were regulations that were created in this range, and it was technically illegal for the states to do that.
Well, it's hard to say it. It's an odd perspective, but I just think that women should just be able to decide for themselves.
But should they be able to decide for themselves here? And this is the thing, because that's a question, is Roe v. Wade, I think, is bad law. But if someone is going to say it's good law, then it is incumbent upon them to say when is okay and when's not. And it seems like you believe there should be some limitations.
Well, think about it this way. Think about women who do make the choice to have an abortion. They're already, depending on their perspective, but they're already going to be dealing with psychological repercussions.
From the abortion?
Yeah, I mean, that's very common.
Yeah, there's a lot of trauma.
I feel like regardless at what state of development the baby is in, I mean, it's a choice that they have to make.
So even at these weeks?
Yeah.
So you support laws that allow abortion up until all the way 9 months?
I would say. Yeah.
I'm just a little confused because you said depending on where they are developmentally,
well,
like those babies they can be born, right? There are plenty of babies. I mean, my twins were born before this.
I know. I probably contradicted myself.
But many times.
And this isn't. That's why I show it. It's the opposite of a gotcha. I'm trying to understand your perspective, because I will say, to me, the only way to consistently draw the line is at fertilization. Once there's new DNA,
right,
that's separate from the mother and the father. Right? It's a new genetic code that determines everything from, hand size, eye color, male pattern baldness, versus something arbitrary.
Right.
Because I think then you get into the territory of up until 9 months, and I mean, we're no longer in the discussion of viability, right? If you support that, then that just means it doesn't matter if the baby is viable or not.
I have to run to
Okay.
because this is the end of my lunch break.
All right.
But I will just leave you with the fact that I think this is definitely an interesting discussion, and I think it's really good to explore it. And I do see your side. I see your viewpoint.
Thank you.
And I think I would have to take a little bit more time myself to really think about exactly.
I think that's very reasonable.
Everything.
I think we all should.
Yeah.
As opposed to just yelling at each other.
You bring up good points, but at the
We should
same
all take
time,
the
I mean,
time to
there's
think
just
about it, but we should all do so with the facts and not with manipulative graphics.
a lot of variables.
I understand where you're coming from, and I understand that a lot of people feel that way. Would we, before you leave, would we at least agree that the overturning of Roe v. Wade has been a little misrepresented, in that most people think it's a ban on abortion, and that's not what it is.
Again, it's not being misrepresented. You're misrepresenting the media's portrayal of it because you want to bash the media for what they are doing, which is saying that there are automatic trigger laws, and there are places in America that abortion will become automatically illegal in when Roe versus Wade is overturned.
There is the possibility it could be clouded.
Yeah.
I mean, also when you're dealing with mass social media, it's very easy for things to be misinterpreted.
Or even mainstream media like ABC and CNN.
And then you're going to get into the whole Snowden thing. Like, everything's like everything's...
Nothing is real.
Yeah, or like Big Brother's watching 1984.
Well, Big Brother's definitely watching.
Exactly.
I think we both agree that Big Brother is definitely watching at this point.
I mean, at this point, I could have somebody
a Department of Misinformation in the federal government.
Like in my phone. Like somebody could be watching me right now.
Do you know how you fix that? Sticky note.
Yeah.
I always feel like somebody's watching me.
I'm high tech with that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right, thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time.
By the way, a sticky note will prevent the phone from spying on you because the phone listens to you as well. I know this because when I was at a Christmas dinner at one of my wife's relatives at her uncle's house, he is a nurse, and for some reason he was having a conversation about flesh-eating genital bacteria. What a great thing to have discussed during Christmas dinner. Or was it Thanksgiving? I don't know. It was some holiday dinner. And I'd never talked about this subject before. I never looked up the subject before. And even after the conversation, I never looked it up ever again. I had no interest in finding out any information about flesh-eating genital bacteria. But lo and behold, 2 to 3 days after we came home from that meal, I got an ad on Facebook. What the ad on Facebook say? Do you have flesh-eating genital bacteria? Here's medication that you could use. I'm like, wow. Spying much, Facebook or Google or what have you? It's crazy how much they do spy on you. There was that one couple that did a experiment where they only talked about having a cat or getting a cat around this one phone and not the other one, and that phone started playing, giving advertisements on Facebook and Google and whatever for like cat treats, cat food, cat litter, etc. Although sometimes I think when people buy advertising online that they're wasting their money, because a lot of times, like when I go to Disney, I'll like have done everything that I need to do Disney-wise. And buy all my tickets. I'll have come back from my Disney trip. And then I'll start seeing ads for Disney. Like, hey, you want to go to Disney? Here's the... I'm like, I just went. You're wasting these people's money. So, anyway.
Yes.
Be well.
Yes, thank you.
Hi. Doing fine, thanks. Do any of you have 2 minutes? I know you got the Jimmy John, so you did it crazy fast.
I said it was crowded.
Well, I was going to ask you guys about the Roe v. Wade situation going on. What about you? You have 3 minutes? It's more important to get a female's perspective. Get out of here. Get out of here.
Yeah, screw me, right?
What's your opinion on the potential overturning of Roe v. Wade?
This isn't going to be is this recording right now?
It could, yeah, it's recording, but we're trying to get opinions from people. That's all. Just what your opinion is on the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Okay, so you support the Roe v. Wade as it was before?
Oh, yes, yes.
You know, that was created as a law by 5 white guys.
Yes, oh, I know.
So I'm saying they decided
as well as it could have been.
what women could do with their bodies.
Yeah.
But, so, either way, that's kind of how it's going, right?
I'm like sweating right now. I really can't be on I feel like this might be like a violation of like me speaking.
They don't let you speak? You're not allowed to speak your mind? It's not white men who run that company, is it? They shouldn't be able to tell you what you do with your mouth.
It is.
Do you want me to go talk to them? You want to go with you in the office?
No.
I'll go to the office. I'll talk to those white guys. They can't tell you what you can and can't do with your body.
I gotta go though. I got a meeting to get to.
Okay, all right. Go have your meeting.
Can you just like not air this? I don't know.
Let's just make sure there are no white guys in it.
Let's not air this. Then he aired it.
Are there white guys in that meeting? You shouldn't be meeting with them. You should be telling them to meet with you.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
It's a black woman or intersectional who said, because don't let them be like, hey, you got to be here at 11:15.
Yeah,
because that's them telling you, it's them using, like, you know.
Yeah.
My point is, do your own you know, you do you. Hey, what's his name?
Gordo.
Gordo? Mary. Gordo, like Mortal Kombat?
Yeah.
Awesome. Is that why you were named Gordo?
No, it's named after a Canadian singer. And
like Gordon Lightfoot?
Gord Downey. Gord Downey.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I'm Canadian. So are you Canadian?
No, I'm Texan.
All right.
Born and raised.
Okay. Now they're appropriating Canadian culture. So, Gordo and Mary, thanks for taking the time. You know, they're just had a great conversation with those folks. So friendly.
Yeah.
Have you been following kind of the Roe v. Wade overturning?
Very, very closely.
Yeah.
Okay.
With those folks, whose folks were those? Because he wasn't really having a conversation with some folks so friendly. So I don't know. This maybe goes to the fact that he hasn't included every single person that he's talked about. So we'll see.
What's your opinion on that?
I think it's pretty fucked up what's going on.
Okay.
I think everybody should have the right to choose, well, particularly women. I think when it's something that's affecting your body, you should have the right to choose how you're, you should have the right to choose how you go about your own health. And I think taking that away from people, and not even just taking away, but criminalizing it.
You know, now that he's mentioned Gordon Lightfoot, I now have the music in my head. The ballad of the Edmund Fitzgerald, like Ichigumi or Gichigumi or whatever, where it took place.
Anyway. Is a very backward step for a country that prides itself on freedom.
Mm-hmm. Criminalizing abortion.
Yeah.
Okay. And what do you think, Mary? What's your opinion?
I think it's terrible. It's awful.
Same reasoning?
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Is it your impression that Roe v. Wade overturning... Well, let me ask you this first. What do you think about the leak? You know, the fact that this was leaked from the Supreme Court?
I think it's pretty crazy to have like a leak of that magnitude. But
yeah.
I think it's also very important that that we have this...
It's funny to think that all these people that are criticizing the fact that it was a leak from the Supreme Court probably love the fact that Snowden leaked a whole bunch of other stuff that was probably much more damaging because it helped them. They love leaks when it helps them. They hate leaks when it hurts them. And why did it hurt them? Because it's giving people more time to react. You know, it could be affecting some primaries. You know, maybe that the woman who was running in Pennsylvania, who was coming in third underneath Oz and the other guy, Campbell, I think, maybe she would have done better had you not had the specter of Roe v. Wade being overturned, because there are people back in 2016 who voted for Trump, and when they said, well, what about Supreme Court justices? What about Roe v. Wade being overturned? Those people were like, Roe versus Wade will never be overturned. And they just went on and voted for Trump because they didn't believe that it was a possibility that Roe versus Wade would ever be overturned. So they didn't feel that Trump being elected was going to affect them and affect that right. But when in reality it did. So and that's what perhaps maybe the leak did enable some people in these primaries to not do as well, because they're like, whoa, well, Roe versus Wade was overturned, so I'm not going to elect this crazy person who argues that because her mom gestated at 11 years old, that we should legalize or criminalize all abortions. 11 years old. No 11-year-old should be forced to gestate at all, at any length of term. No 11-year-old can consent to sex. It's always rape if they're 11. Clearly. Yet they want to advocate to force that person, any 11-year-old who is raped and then impregnated, to then gestate to term? That's, again, that is morally abhorrent. That should be something that is considered morally abhorrent, and that should be universally be considered morally abhorrent, but we have people who clearly want to force that on people. Oh, Julie has to go. Thank you so much for joining us, Julie. Appreciate you joining us. I wanted to hopefully get this done a little bit sooner. I think this might be one of the last ones. We have, 25 more minutes, so...
knowledge, so you can...
I mean, 25 minutes of video probably means about another 30 to 45 minutes of video with commentary, so... But we're going to keep on trucking with this one, hopefully, and hopefully we can zoom through some of it. If there's repetition, my commentary won't be that big.
At least, talk about it before this all happens. We have a very hard right-leaning Supreme Court right now, which we've had, of course, this is America, we've had whether Democrat or Republican. In the very large gist of the political scale, we were right-leaning throughout our history. But right now it's to an extent that we really haven't seen in a very, very long time, really, since the Civil War. So I think it's when you start taking away rights that have been affirmed over and over and over on this magnitude, I think it's important to...
I'm sorry, I'm confused. But you sound like you're pretty right-wing, because you talked about freedoms and personal liberties. That's...
No, I think freedom and personal liberties...
Yeah. The right do not have a monopoly on freedoms and personal liberties. In fact, the right often want to ban gay marriage. They want to ban homosexual sex. If the right wing could do it, they would overturn Lawrence v. Texas in a second. There are plenty of people on the right who oppose marijuana usage, who want to keep marijuana usage criminalized, despite the fact that, they claim to be for liberty. But they're not for liberty because they don't want you to smoke a plant. Now, it should be fine if you're driving under the influence of any sort of control, any sort of substance that impairs your ability to operate a vehicle, should be illegal. Fine. And so if you're driving as if you're under the influence of some sort of drug, then you should get pulled over. But if I'm going to sit home and want to eat a marijuana brownie, I should be able to sit home and eat a marijuana brownie, just because, and it shouldn't be the government telling me what not to do. But I don't know Crowder's specific stance on marijuana legalization. However, the idea that conservatives are somehow pro-liberty is funny.
Right wing or left wing, there's always bipartisan issues, and no matter who you are, you're a f***ing communist. You're communist because you think freedom is of this way, and I'm not a communist, but and you're hard right wing, it's because you want freedoms in this way. Everybody has their own ideas of how to get there.
No, communism is not about freedom. It's pretty clearly expressed. It's anti-freedom. Like, there's no one who argues that communism is freedom.
There's communists that argue that, and
not Marx or...
There are anarcho-communists who would probably say that communism is freedom because you're choosing to enter into those types of agreements. And communism, by definition, requires communes. Communism doesn't work on a grand scale. Socialism is more... Well, again, I talked about labels, I think, 2 weeks ago on the podcast. Socialism, pure socialism doesn't work. Pure capitalism doesn't work. Whatever. But communism, like in Israel, you have kibbutz, the kibbutzim. This is the multiple in Hebrew of kibbutz, where people work, and they work in a communal environment. They are little communes, and they work together to create goods that this commune then sells as a whole, and they benefit when they sell it in a market. So they're benefiting from capitalism, but they are themselves a commune because they've consented to live in this commune and do things a certain way, because they feel that it's a better way to do things. So
Lenin.
Marx does argue about the freedom that comes with communism. It's about the leadership of the proletariat, which is the individual, which, if you're into individualism, I'd assume.
Can I ask you, is it freedom if you're taking my rights away?
So, well, this is
right
interesting.
To my own body.
Sorry. This is interesting. I think there's kind of two different questions. Is the idea, and if we want to talk about sort of abortion, we can. I sort of want to discuss the impression of the law. So you mentioned like federally, criminalizing abortion. Are you under the impression that that's what the overturning of Roe v. Wade is?
No, the overturning of Roe v. Wade is giving states the right to criminalize abortion.
Yeah.
Which, okay.
States to set their own rules.
But if you go deeper into it,
more specifically, like in the second and first trimester.
Is finally honest about the fact that it's also the second trimester.
You get into this, there is a big discrepancy, particularly in the U.S., between income levels, and if you, particularly in a state like Texas, which is fucking huge, as you know, if you don't make enough, like, it costs to get to another state to have an abortion, just to travel out, it's going to be like gas prices are incredibly high, all this. Just
what are they
to get
today?
to another,
are they over
like
4
or something? Yeah.
It's not that bad.
That's pretty. He just said it was bad. Seems like you're couching it a little bit.
Anyways. But
yeah, they're like California.
If you don't have the money, which there are quite a lot of low-income people, not just in Texas, but in the U.S. in general, to get out, to access your right to an abortion, which isn't even your right unless you're in another state, you can only do that if you have money. So unless there's... I'm against criminalizing abortion completely, but if you want to go like that and you still care about personal freedoms and rights, there should be like very hardcore programs to allow the people that do want it to go to another state. And how it's set up right now, it's gonna it's leading the way to make it not just illegal to have an abortion within Texas or whatever state that criminalizes it, but to make it criminal to go to another state to get an abortion. And I think that's like pretty totalitarian and authoritarian.
So where would it make it? Your impression is that it would make it criminal to go to another state to get an abortion?
No, but that's what it's leading up to, because these are precedents we're talking about. This is how the Supreme Court.
I haven't heard that suggest.
Okay, Crowder hasn't heard that, but Missouri is talking about that. Other states are talking about that too. Other states are saying not only are we going to criminalize abortion in our state, but we're going to criminalize making it. We're going to make it illegal for you to leave the state and obtain an abortion from another state. So here is an example of Crowder being. Again, maybe I'm being naive in believing that he's making an honest statement at this point. Maybe I'm being naive, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he's being truthful, that he doesn't know. But just because he doesn't know doesn't mean it's not happening. This individual here, I'm pointing the wrong way because that it's right there on my screen. The individual who he's talking to here did hear about what Missouri is trying to do and how Missouri would prohibit travel. And if one state does it, I'm sure other states will do it too. Because that's what happens. You know, we had Texas try and pass the bounty law with abortions, and Louisiana passed the same thing. So and as these states' laws become, you know, in effect, because Roe v. Wade is dropped, with the 13 trigger states, you then will have other states be like, oh, well, this one's now legal. Let me draft this law to be like this, or let's push the boundary even further. Let's try, because that's what they're going to do. They're going to keep pushing the boundary until people are controlled. They want government so small that it fits right in the vagina. Let's continue.
I just told you, this is how precedents work in legal scenarios. You're setting a very large precedent like this, which gives people the right to go further and further and further. The whole Roe v. Wade precedent is based on that it's not allowed. This abortion wasn't mentioned in the Constitution, but also the right to marry interracially isn't in the Constitution. The right to a lot of things that we take as very granted and that are important aren't mentioned in the Constitution. So I think
even though he didn't bring it up, I'll bring it up. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. The 9th Amendment. Learn it, copy it down, inscribe it in your head so you can spit it out and talk to other people about it. Let's continue.
This is like a very dangerous thing that's happening right now.
Yeah, I think and your question was, no, I understand where you're coming from. I would disagree with, first off, do you mean precedent or precedents? You used both.
Precedent.
Okay, precedent, yeah. And you asked me a question earlier.
I asked you a question?
Yeah, you asked me a question. I wanted to get to the Supreme Court kind of Roe v. Wade law. So I actually appreciate that you understand that it goes to the states, and the states have that right, because you actually understand what Roe v. Wade being overturned is. A lot of people think that there's a federal criminalizing of abortion, which isn't really the case.
Again, he presents that a lot of people, but many people are saying, that's a very Donald Trump type tactic again. Many people are saying this. It doesn't mean that many people are saying this. Probably very few people are saying it. Probably more people understand what overturning Roe versus Wade does, even at a very simplistic level. They might understand the intricacies of it, but they understand that there are certain laws with trigger laws that go instantly into effect once Roe v. Wade is overturned.
No, it's up to the states.
Yeah, I haven't seen any literature that suggests
over half the states already have a.
And it's also, I think it's also very difficult when it leads it to the states, because the gerrymandering is so intense in places like Texas and stuff, which really skews the political outlook when the large majority of people in cities like this, like Dallas, do vote blue, and I'm not a Democrat. In fact, I'm very heavily against the Democratic Party.
But we can get to that in a second. But again, gerrymandering, big issue. Gerrymandering skews it so that people don't have the appropriate say within the states. Not just at the federal level, but at the state and local level as well. For example, I think Austin, where they're in, if I'm recalling this correctly, they split it up and they chop up Austin into a bunch of different other districts, so that even though Austin is a completely blue city, you only have one Democrat representing Austin in Congress. So even though the entire city as a whole has a fully Democratic mayor. I think every single elected official in Austin is a Democrat. Only one person representing Austin in Congress is a Democrat because of how they've gerrymandered. And if you have a problem with gerrymandering, go to stopthecoup.liberaldan.com and you can support that cause as well. I would love to see, check it out. I have some videos on it. Yes, both sides gerrymander, but the Republicans do it way worse. And I have some videos on that. I kind of took a break from that video series because I wanted to focus on other things, especially with all this stuff that's coming up. But hopefully I'll continue those soon. But stopthecoup.liberaldan.com is the website you can go to. I think there's a link to it also on liberaldan.com as well. Let's continue.
Just about as equally as much as I'm against the Republican Party, I think the U.S. politics are fucked across the board.
So how would you identify?
I am progressive, left-leaning. I believe in human rights, which, I mean, I think we all deserve a right to... We're the richest country in the world, and it's 2022. We're very progressive. We have the right to health care. We have the right to bodily autonomy and to be an individual person, to chase your self-actualization, be the person you want to be, as long as you're not harming anybody else.
I want to get this guy on my podcast.
I know this is where it comes down to, because in abortion, in this rhetoric, it always comes down to whether you believe a fetus is a person or not. And I believe, because I don't remember, and nobody remembers what they were as a fetus because you're not sentient, I don't believe you're a person until you're born, until you're a sentient being.
I don't remember anything before my second birthday.
Yeah, me neither, which is what well, I'm also not advocating for aborting someone at a year old, but
no, I know, but I was saying the line of sentience, right?
The right to your own body.
But you're not even, you're not in the world
at all. Why are you forcing women to carry out a pregnancy that they can't afford, that, you know, that would lead up to a lot of high rates of infant mortality, people can't take care of a child, people can't go to the doctor. It's a problem. The healthcare system is awful. You can't afford to have a child in this country. It's expensive.
Right.
I'm 21. I could never afford to have a child. I can afford my health insurance.
The rent is too damn high.
Is expensive, but once a year, twice a year to go to the doctor, but that's about it. I can't afford to go to a hospital and have a child.
We can't even afford to go to the hospital in general.
I can't afford housing in this state, in this country. I can't.
Yeah, I can't even afford to go to the doctor in general. If I get actually sick, like I'm f***ed. People that make $100,000 a year, you get cancer, you're bankrupt.
Where do you work?
Right now, I just got back from Europe doing a study abroad, so this is my first day back, so I don't have a job right now. I study human rights, actually.
Okay, cool.
I study human rights and international studies.
And where were you studying that?
Barcelona.
Like a university?
Yeah, IAU is the university. It's my final semester, so I was just finishing. I've already finished my degree. I was just doing like my electives, basically, and traveling. But yeah, I study human rights.
Notice, as of right now, I don't see it anywhere on his person, but maybe I think he did call for somebody else to give it to him, but I don't think that Crowder is going to be showing that chart to this person, because I'm thinking that maybe this person might be able to see the flaws in the chart. And what are they looking at? Is he just staring at her ass? I don't know.
Rights at SMU, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and you said you can't afford a house.
No, who can afford a house at, like, I'm 23. Who can afford a house at 23? Unless you're a Mark.
Or you said you can't afford a place to live. So where do you?
Well, I could afford a place to live if I was willing. Compared to 5 years ago, it was very easy for me. If for 5 years ago, I could go bartend, like, which is what I normally do, and I can afford a decent place for like $800, $700 a month. In Dallas, it's very hard to find. Like, to get a place that's not cockroach infested and like falling down, I'd have to have like 2 or 3 roommates, which is normal. But I mean, I've been here my entire life, and it's just getting. I've seen the change firsthand. We bought our house for $80,000. That neighborhood's about $400,000 now because of these multi-corporations coming in and
like
buying
Vanguard
up all
and
neighborhoods.
Yeah. We'd probably agree. You know, Elizabeth Warren saying they should be too big to fail, but I don't think any company is too big to fail. They should fail.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, but I understand where you're going with this situation, and I also believe that. I believe that when a corporation gets past a certain threshold of money, they should be checked and limited by the government, because I believe it was Thomas Jefferson has a quote where he talks about if the power is directed towards the banks. I wish you can look it up later if you want. You probably won't, because I know you like to nitpick your things.
So he knows who Crowder is, so he's more ready on this. But I guess just watch Hamilton. You'll see that Jefferson was very opposed to the fact that the banks in New York gets whatever. That's what you get for watching Hamilton. All you have to do is watch Hamilton, and you'll see Thomas Jefferson's issue with national fiscal policies and getting money towards the banks, while Wall Street robs us blind in search of chips to cash in, as he would say in Washington on Your Side.
Nothing against you.
No,
but,
this will be totally unedited.
But you can.
I really appreciate everything you've been saying.
There's a thing about Thomas
helpful.
Jefferson that talks about when the money is goes. You can look up Thomas Jefferson bank quote, I believe. And when the banks, if they're given too much money, and by banks it's capital interest goes above the people, it's no longer a democracy, and it's true.
Here's the bank quote on private banks. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations will grow up around them and will deprive the people of their property until their children wake up homeless on the continent that their fathers conquered. Or as he said in the play, I am the cabinet, I am complicit in watching him grabbing at power and kissing, and Washington isn't going to listen to discipline. This is the difference. This kid is out.
I certainly agree.
We really pride ourselves on being a democracy, but we're not.
I think we can find common ground there, in the sense that
I can find common ground with a lot of right-wing people, but our ideals are against each other because there are certain things.
Can you let me speak?
Yeah.
I think we're saying the same thing on Too Big to Fail. I think that big banks want to privatize profits and socialize losses, right? And I think you're saying pick a lane, so where we won't find common ground is more so socialize the banks.
Well, what do you mean about socialized losses? Can you expand on that?
Well, they get bailed out by the taxpayer once they screw up their own banking practices, right? They're insured. In other words, when the bank has.
And we talked about that on last night's show when we were talking about re-going over the whole Wall Street Bets GME AMC thing, was that the actions that were taken by Robinhood ultimately ended up helping the banks, helping these financial institutions when these financial institutions were at risk to suffer. They were not allowed to suffer. The people were made to suffer because the people who were holding the stocks were set up to make bank as the shorts needed to close, and people desperately needed to sell these shares that they had shorted or buy the shares that they'd previously shorted, and as such they were protected and didn't have to pay such an exorbitant price, because as some people believed, those prices would have gone up to maybe over 1,000 if they would have allowed the market to work its way. But they would not allow the market, again, because as Crowder said, and I agree with Crowder on this one, that we do have a situation where they can privatize profits and socialize losses.
As a problem, they're insured by the Fed.
That happens with insurance too. Why does the federal government run the flood program, and why aren't we requiring people that write insurance policies to also write flood? Why in states like Louisiana do we have to have other policies, like the state can cover things like wind and hail, but not fire and theft and casualty? Because the insurance companies have been able to push off the higher risks policies onto the states. But you can't write insurance if you're only taking the higher risk. That was the problem with the Republican plan that would have replaced Obamacare. Part of it was that it would force states to have high-risk pools that people could join in. Well, if you're insuring high-risk people, you should get to be able to insure low-risk people as well. You should be able to insure everybody. You should be required to insure everybody. If you get to insure the low risk, you should have to insure the high risk. If you shouldn't only be able to be forced to insure the high risk, you should be able to get the benefit of insuring the low risk so that you can have a pooling effect and have your costs come down normally. But again, we're getting off topic.
Federal government.
Yeah.
And so that's the taxpayer, and that's people who really shouldn't, even people who are middle class, people who are lower middle class, paying taxes shouldn't bail out banks, right?
Even past that.
Do we agree on that?
I do agree on that.
There you go,
but even past that, what the hell do we get as taxpayers even without that? We're one of the richest nations in the world. We don't have our free healthcare. We don't have a public transport system that's adequate. Dallas, we have a public transport system, but come on, it's bullshit.
Arlington, there is none.
Is there no public transit in Arlington?
For most of the U.S., there's compared to Europe, you don't need a car, really. You can survive quite easily without one. For most of the U.S., if you don't have a car, you are struggling. You don't have a life. You don't have the ability to have a social life. It's difficult to get to work. The U.S. is quite big. We don't invest at all.
And the reason I don't fast forward through this, because there's a lot of stuff that's not related to their abortion, is because it is related to abortion. Because if you're in such a situation where you have no access to transportation, you're struggling to make ends meet because the rent is so high, because private interests are buying up property and therefore artificially reducing the available supply of housing, thus making housing prices go up. And even if you already have a house, it makes the property taxes go too high. You can't afford the property tax. You can't afford to live there. You have to sell and get out. And then you might have to move further away from the place where you're working in order to be able to, work and make a living, which again puts when gasoline is so high. And the reason gasoline is so high is mostly because these gasoline robber barons are manipulating the markets by artificially reducing and not drilling, artificially reducing their production, so therefore the supply is artificially reduced, and therefore the prices go up. But conservatives don't understand supply versus, many conservatives don't understand supply and demand. But the reason that all of this stuff is absolutely important in this conversation is because all of that is going to make people less likely to be able to feel that they can afford to have a kid, so it makes them more likely to want to obtain an abortion if they end up being pregnant.
We don't invest in the social good really with any of our tax money. Our tax money is it goes to.
I don't really know that I agree with that. I mean, you're talking about many trillions of dollars spent in the war on poverty, and we just talked about multi-trillion dollar infrastructure bills.
Yeah, but you're in Dallas right now, and you see the homeless people in every corner.
No, I agree. I just don't think that the federal spending on the war on poverty works. Just like the war on drugs hasn't worked.
Well, yeah,
I don't think throwing more money at it helps.
Well, just because this spending of federal money didn't work to end like the homelessness in Dallas doesn't necessarily mean that all expenditures of money would be a failure. It just means that if a particular expenditure of money failed, it's because of the way that was handled, not because overall it's a bad idea. It's another problem that conservatives will too often make.
So I think that the problem is
then what are you going for?
Well, I think the problem there, right, is we both agree that it's corruption. There's a lot of money that's being spent. It's not being spent in the right way. I don't necessarily think that all those things are fundamental human rights, but I certainly would argue that the money is being spent very poorly. I mean, there's a lot of money being spent. We have a spending problem, and it's not going anywhere useful. But I wanted to get back to kind of Roe v. Wade and the subject. Let me ask you this, because there are people, for example, we had four people there, African Americans, who had a problem with.
How do you know they're poor just as African American?
I said four.
Oh, four. I think you said four.
Ooh, careful with your presumptions.
No, I thought I misheard you. It wasn't a presumption. It sounded four and four.
There were four African Americans there. The number four.
I thought you said four.
Okay. I didn't.
What were you asking?
Well, thanks.
Is their point of view was, okay, they were pro-choice. And then she was a mother of four. And when I asked her about the Texas heartbeat bill, she said, well, yeah, of course, after a heartbeat, because she had done an ultrasound, she said that's a life, that's a separate heart. Whose heart are you stopping? My question to you is this, because I know you're coming in hot, and
I'm not coming in hot. I'm really speaking like, I'm not coming in hot, I'm not being aggressive.
Can you understand the other perspective where someone says, someone does certainly more than half the country believe at a limitation at some point, that at a certain point, it's no longer your own body. That's their argument, and that's why the Supreme Court has said it's bad law, and states should have the right to enforce those regulations. I'll let the woman speak.
Will the fetus survive if it's outside of your body?
So you don't have any children, right?
No, I don't.
Because a baby won't survive outside of the body.
No, it's relying on your body.
Right.
A baby, and if once you've given birth, if you feel like you could give birth, you want to gestate and give birth and give the child up for adoption, you then can choose to not raise the child, and as such, you don't have to be the one providing for the child. But even if you are the one providing for the child, you only have certain requirements. You don't have to be carrying around baby 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Just like when you're carrying the fetus of the embryo, when you are pregnant, that fetus, that embryo, is using your body 24/7, 365. So, and for the vast majority of the pregnancy, that if you removed the fetus or the embryo, it would not survive at all.
A baby won't survive outside of the body, but I mean, a baby delivered naturally won't survive outside of the body.
I mean,
but we're talking about fetus right now.
I'm talking about a fetus.
So what changes from, let's say, 8 weeks and 6 days, 8 months, 3 weeks, 6 days?
Or as Phoebe would say in Friends, are you in there, little fetus? In 9 months will you come greet us? I will buy you some Adidas. I know way too much Friends quotes.
To 9 months. Is it just inside, outside the womb that makes it a person?
Well, one's a fetus and one's a baby.
But why is one a fetus if it's just 1 day shy of 9 months?
It's not relying on your body to your...
The look on his face was just like, oh, he's really going here, isn't he? Again, because he's trying to make this big deal over the fact that there are abortions that take place in the third trimester, but nobody's getting an abortion at 39 weeks and 6 days. That's not happening. And the people who are aborting in the third trimester, again, to repeat myself because we're repeating several things over each interview, is the fact that only 1% of abortions take place after the 21st week of pregnancy, and those people who do so are doing so not because they're choosing to abort, but because they're having to abort because of some other issue, like their health or the fact that there might be a fetal abnormality that causes the fetus to not be able to survive outside the womb.
Umbilical cord, and once it's outside and cut, as
so
a
is
baby,
that what defines a person as the umbilical cord?
my opinion, yeah.
So what if a woman gives birth and they haven't cut the cord yet? Does that mean they can abort the baby at that point?
But nobody's even talking about aborting like a baby that's still on the cord.
It actually does exist. It actually does exist. There was a bill.
But we have like so many billions of people in the world.
It was a bill
presented. The pause. Wait, Daily News. Is this really you and not Bringing a Boy? Did you hop on and are you not Bringing a Boy? I mean, you're not typing in caps. So typically when you type in caps, you are the alternate name form of Bringing a Boy. But are you really Daily News? And if so, how are you feeling after your accident?
And I feel like I've been pretty respectful in letting you talk a lot and go in different directions.
Well, you're interviewing me, so of course I would talk a lot. So yeah, and I'm also being respectful.
Well, I think interrupting is different from talking a lot. Would we agree? And you interrupted her. You interrupted me.
Well, if you want me to leave, it's okay.
Well, I would like to hear her answer.
I'm having a conversation.
Okay, so the umbilical, is that what defines personhood? I mean, the point that other people are defining person, and people define it differently. Yeah. And I understand that. Mm-hmm. For example, these 4 African Americans said, okay, heartbeat, they agree with the Texas bill. Some people think that it's after the first trimester. But at a certain, where would you define when it's a person?
Why is it called the heartbeat bill?
Because it's when you can detect a fetal heartbeat.
Can you detect a fetal heartbeat at 6 weeks?
Yes. So?
Not sure about that.
Yeah, you can.
Okay, so what is your
argument? You used to be able to, but you can now with more advanced ultrasound. And I just had twins, so yeah, I know it for a fact.
What is your argument?
No, my question is, can you understand, in other words, those people who were horrified right at the idea of aborting a baby after a heartbeat, and there are a lot of Americans who believe that, okay, once it has its own fingers, toes, sex, there are people who believe, like I do.
I believe in the woman's choice. I believe in the right to choose.
So when does that line, I guess, when is there the line of, and this is why it's going to states?
I mean, I've talked to many people that are pro-choice about this. I believe the woman has the right to abort a child whenever they want.
So all the way up until 9 months, including birth?
Yeah.
And you don't believe that baby is a person at 8 months, 7, even though they could be born and viable? Because you said viability earlier. They are viable. It's viable at 21 weeks.
If it's a person, if it's still...
Nobody is gestating till 8 weeks, and what did it say, 8 months and 7 weeks? Is that what he said? But nobody's gestating that long and then being like, oh, I don't want to be a parent anymore. Yeet.
In your body, you have the choice to do what you want.
So is the location what determines a person, in your body or outside of your body?
Once it's delivered, you carried. Okay, first of all, nobody really wants to abort a child at 8 months.
It does. It happens all the time.
For many reasons, if they...
I've had a couple friends with abortions, and it was never at 8 months. It was always at, when they find out.
A few months,
But my problem tens of thousands a year.
My problem also with this abortion bill is that it's making it so
Why did they want to abort the child at 8 months old?
Well, now we're shifting the goalposts, right? I'm just saying it does happen.
See, I hadn't seen this. She asks the perfect question. Why are they aborting at 8 months old? And he's like, that's shifting the goalposts. No, it's not. It's an absolutely relevant report because the reason you're aborting at 8 months is because of some other issue, not because it's a choice, but because you're being forced to by some other thing. So that was just the complete and utter example of Crowder's dishonesty here.
There are states that restrict it, but there are some states that don't. My question is,
wait, hold on.
Would you
Hi, Suzette. And see, Suzette, I don't like to necessarily always say your name because you don't necessarily say, hey, it's Suzette or whatever when you call in. And so we just, I know I represent you as my friend from California. So I don't want to, if you didn't want your name out there, and that's why I kind of respect your privacy as much as I can. But thank you very much for liking the show. And I'm glad that you are well. I'm sorry that you had to deal with your accident. So I appreciate the fact that you continue to hang on there and be my most loyal. You and Bringing a Boy, you both are my most loyal conservative listeners. So I appreciate y'all, even if we disagree a bunch.
Restricted then, if you're saying...
No.
Okay, so someone should be able to abort at 8 months, 9 months.
If that's what they choose.
Okay, why?
Why? Because it's their body, so it's their choice.
So
it's a person who is able to have a child, so it's their choice.
So if a woman is 8 months pregnant, using your premise, since we've gone to this, does that woman have 20 fingers? Does she have 20 toes? Does she have a penis if it's a boy?
What does
Does
that
she have two
matter?
brains?
What does that matter?
Well, because you're ending the life, the functioning life of another human being that has all of those things. So I'm saying, you're saying that's her body, so that woman has 20 toes.
What does that matter?
It's not her body if she doesn't have 20 fingers and toes.
Oh, you're saying 10 fingers plus her 10 fingers, that's 20 fingers.
So is it still the woman's body?
I thought he was talking about some sort of mutant.
It's her body,
Well, is
so
it her
it's
child
her
or is it her
choice.
body?
Both. It's
Well, it's one or the other. A child is not her body.
But who
her body has
decides,
to
who
be separate
decides
from
when
her
it's
child.
a child? Probably the person that's carrying.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether you would call it a child or a fetus. I know this is what it comes down to. Is it a child or a fetus? In my opinion, when it's in your body, the medical idea of what you call it, a fetus, is a fetus. If you aborted me when I was a fetus, I'm not going to fucking complain because I don't fucking know. Because I'm not fucking sentient. I'm not a person. You're a
Well, there are plenty of people who aren't sentient. People with brain damage, babies who aren't sentient.
I'm not talking about like cleansing or anything like that. I'm talking about.
Well, you brought up sentience, and I'm just saying that's an important distinction to make. Is
I understand. Yeah.
Why is it not? Because you said child or her body. There's a big difference. Is it a child? I'm trying to understand where you're coming from.
Not
I understand where they came from.
I don't think you're actually trying to understand where I'm coming from.
Well, I asked you, could you understand where?
Absolutely. That's the best statement all night. He is not trying to understand where he's coming from. If he was trying to understand where they were coming from, he would have asked, well, why is it a different? What makes the difference between the reasoning that someone at 8 months old would get the abortion? He didn't want it. He saw it as moving the goalposts, but it's not moving the goalpost. Again, more dishonesty from him, and and she's correct. He doesn't want to know because that's his goal here is not to learn why they believe. His goal. See, when I have a political conversation, and I do believe that abortion should not be political. It should be an issue of rights, and rights should not be political. But when I have a conversation that's political, even about this, I am always open to the idea that I'm wrong. I am always open to the idea that somebody may bring up an opinion that makes me change my worldview. And I go, you know what? You're right. I used to feel that way about the term rape culture. I used to not agree with the idea that we lived in a rape culture. Why? I didn't really understand what people were talking about. To me, it seemed weird. It seemed counterintuitive. But eventually, somebody made an argument to me as to why we lived in a rape culture that made sense to me. And I then was like, okay. And then I started to see all the other arguments and started unraveling. So I'm never so stuck on a view that you can't change my mind with facts, logic, and reason. Now, I mean, should Nazis be able to kill Jews? No, obviously not. But that's again, that shouldn't be considered a political opinion. That should be considered that's a matter of rights, and rights shouldn't be debated. But you want any discussion that we're going to have, I'm going to wonder why. If I was him, and I really believe that if I was pro-life, and I really wanted to get to understand what this person was saying, I would have asked why it mattered. Why was it an important distinction to make between, why somebody would abort at 8 months? But that's not his goal. His goal is to not understand. His goal is to not be open-minded. His goal is to not understand why it is that caused these people to tick differently from him. His goal is to manipulate. His goal is to it's really weird because his arm right there looks like a baby arm. I don't know why. But his goal is to manipulate. His goal is to propagandize. His goal is to not do anything that would involve him maybe learning something or potentially change his worldview. I don't know if it would ever happen. Let's see. Eli Matoya, first time here, subbed. Enjoy the show, Chad, very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. My normal show the normal time for the show is Wednesdays, 8 p.m. Central, either both here on YouTube and blogtalkradio.com/liberaldan. We'll still finish up, but for anybody who might be wanting to jet out early, and again, next on Thursday, we're having Hal Sparks on. Wednesday, we're having Hal Sparks on again, so that'll be a fun show.
Where they're coming from, because I was 4 people. Can you understand where they say, well, it's a separate heartbeat, so I understand some kind of restriction?
Yeah, but I also think maybe they just aren't fully knowledgeable on the entirety of the Texas bill that was passed for 6 weeks.
The 4 black people.
Yeah. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know them. I didn't talk to them
But there are a lot of Americans who think there should be a limitation. You understand that your view is considered, there's extreme left, extreme right is no abortions, even in the case of rape and incest. Yours is abortion up until 9 months. That's considered a pretty radical view, and so I'm curious to understand where you draw. And it seems to me like well, statistically, it's a radical view. Most Americans don't agree with that. Doesn't mean that it's right or wrong.
We need more radicals because we need more people. But again, I don't think my view is a radical view in that, I believe in autonomy. I believe that individuals should be able to choose what they're doing with their body. I don't think government should get in the way, and I don't think we have to make a law about something that's not a problem. Because conservatives typically would argue that if something is not a problem, you don't need to make it. They want less laws, not more laws, supposedly. Supposedly they want less laws, not more laws. And they would typically, if you had, were proposing a law, a solution for something that wasn't a problem, they'd be like, well, don't do that. But in this case, clearly it's different.
I'm just saying it would be considered very far left. What makes it acceptable? And this is a question that I am trying to understand. What makes it acceptable when it's a baby that is totally viable, because that's what you brought up first, it is completely viable outside of the womb. There's no debate at this point, right?
It's still connected to her body.
So it's the umbilical cord.
Can I bring something up real quick?
The fetus is still relying on the nutrients of her body to survive.
Right.
So it's her choice to end that pregnancy.
So it is exclusively that a baby is relying on the nutrients of the mother, because we both know the baby is relying entirely on the mother's capabilities.
Well, once the baby
after.
is born and once it's not connected to that person, then
the baby's relying on the mother's nutrients at that point, right? Mother's milk.
No, not necessarily.
No, because as we should all know by now, there are plenty of people in this country who can't create enough milk to support a baby. Like my wife, for example, we had we had to use formula. Why? Because she didn't produce enough milk. So, no. And again, just because the person gave birth doesn't necessarily mean that that's the person who's going to be raising the child.
Because of modern technology, but for a longest time, they had to be breastfed. They're still reliant upon the mother's nutrients.
Can I bring something up real quick?
Well, not the mother that you don't necessarily have to be the mother that birthed the child to keep the child alive.
Right, but it's reliant upon the nutrients of another woman. You said it's reliant upon the actual nutrients of another body.
What's difference between the now child breastfeeding versus the child who is relying on the nutrients inside the body? Is what you're saying? Yeah. Well, it's the person that had the child inside their body is. Where am I going with this?
We've been drinking, but can I bring something up? You brought up the war on drugs earlier and how it was ineffective because we poured all this money into it and we really heavily criminalized like drugs and to like an extreme extent, and it never works. It actually made the problem worse. If you read any white papers, like any research paper on abortion and like limiting abortions, no matter what your ideal of like how conception or when it becomes a baby, abortions, like throughout anywhere that abortions have been criminalized, they still happen. But when you criminalize them, then you have the problems that we're facing right now in the drug world. It's fentanyl, and I've lost 3 friends in 2 years from fentanyl. But in abortions, it's going to be illegal abortions because people are still going to be desperate and still going to have them, and people are still going to die and be like harmed.
Now I'm 21.
There won't be illegal.
And to expand on that, when I've talked about this before as well, Jeb Bush was governor of Florida. When he defunded Planned Parenthood, abortions went up. The abortion rate went up in his state for the remainder of his term as governor. Meanwhile, when John Hickenlooper, the Democrat, was in charge of Colorado, they implemented a universally available birth control, not just for people with insurance like the Affordable Care Act requires, but for anybody, even if you didn't have insurance. You could have access for free contraception. Guess what happened? Pregnancy rates dropped. So criminalizing abortion, making it illegal to perform abortion, doesn't help prevent abortion rates. It can actually get worse abortion rates at that point. I don't know why we just got out of.
Right now I'm 21. I can't afford to have a child, but if I were pregnant, I couldn't afford to have a child, I would get an abortion, a safe, legal abortion. It would allow me to have a child in the future because I didn't have to harm my own body to abort this child.
Right.
So if a safe, easy abortion, legal, would ensure that I was able to have a child in the future. So why, I don't
understand the question. Are you asking me a question?
No, I'm just making a point.
Okay, because I was just waiting for the answer on the question regarding the breastfeeding and umbilical cord, and I understand you were talking about fentanyl.
So
if we don't have abortions, we'll have more
If you're
fentanyl.
taking away safe, legal abortions, then if someone has no choice and can't afford a child and still...
They have a lot of, let's be honest about this, it's just, I think they have a lot of choices.
You didn't let me finish.
Okay, go ahead.
So if it was not legal to have an abortion and a person is still able to go out and have what we call a back alley abortion, could ruin their body for the rest of their life. They're not going to be able to have a child in the future because it fucked up their uterus. So a safe legal abortion would ensure that child or that person could have a child in the future.
Not necessarily.
Why?
The correlation equaling causation that a safe legal abortion, and there's of course the argument to be made that it's never safe for the baby involved.
Oh, I hate that argument. It's never safe for the baby. Well, yeah, you're terminating the abortion, so therefore, what's going to happen? I mean, I guess unless you're making the argument like I made early on in this broadcast that technically we terminated both of our pregnancies for both of our kids because it was ended a week early. That doesn't mean that we killed the fetuses. We just delivered a week early, and in doing so, that terminated the pregnancy. But yeah, the argument, oh, no abortion is safe. Well, I mean, yeah, but that's not the point.
There are other choices. It wouldn't ensure anything, because what does ensure it is contraception, abstinence, motherhood, adoption.
There is no form, and I'm going to say this here, and I know it's very controversial sometimes, but there is no form of contraception or that is 100% effective. There is no method to prevent you from getting pregnant that is 100% effective. Not one. And if you say, well, Dan, he mentioned abstinence. Isn't abstinence 100% effective? No, because you could choose to abstain from sex. You could be either morally opposed to sex, or you may just choose to abstain to sex because you don't want to get pregnant, you don't want to take that risk, and you could still get raped. And if you're raped, you can still get pregnant. So therefore, there are no forms of pregnancy prevention that work 100% of the time. And so it's terrible to suggest otherwise.
Why
abstinence doesn't work. Everybody knows that.
I gave you 3 other options.
And also, can I tell you, adoption.
I don't know about you, but there's never been a single baby from people who haven't been having sex.
Yeah, but we're all human and everybody has sex. And you try to teach kids about abstinence like they taught us in Texas, and it doesn't work. And a lot of people get pregnant when they're young because they don't know anything about contraception.
They get pregnant if they're not practicing abstinence. Yes, I agree with you.
But who practices abstinence? Are you going to be a monk? Do you practice abstinence?
I've written about it extensively, yeah. Before I was married.
Practice it?
Yeah, before I was married, yeah. A lot of people do.
To each their own. But
now, did he practice abstinence by choice, or was he an incel? I think it's more than he probably was an incel at that point. So, haha. So anyway, let me go ahead. I think I'm going to put this link in the thing. Ethan, if you want, here's a link to the podcasting mic that I'm currently using, and this has been my favorite mic so far to use. I've used several mics. Some of them have been cheaper. This one's a little bit more expensive. Use that mic that I just dropped in chat, and not only if you do buy that with that link, you also help support me as well. So I would appreciate if you do buy that mic to use that link. Anyway, let's continue the video.
Well, you just made an argument that said to each their own. Yeah. I said there's abstinence, contraception.
Most people don't do
that. A teenager in high school, if you tell them to never have sex, well, of course they're going to have sex.
And a lot of people don't
say abstinence, contraception.
And you never teach the person or the child in high school how to have safe sex. Right. That's the whole point of abstinence,
I'm not advocating that. I think I was pretty clear because I brought up the other choices.
We're about to go somewhere, but
right?
Where else?
I don't really give a shit. Yeah. I don't know what you're your point is.
Well, you said
can we wrap
that choice of safe, legal, and rare abortion.
We're just spiraling out of control.
Well, you said the choice of safe, legal, and rare abortion would ensure, and I was saying there are other options that ensure
wrap it up real quick?
Abstinence, contraception. No, hold on a second. Let me finish. Abstinence, contraception, motherhood, adoption. Abortion's not required to ensure it. Do you understand? Because you use the word required to ensure.
I'm sure you're aware that there are states that are making contraceptives illegal.
No, I'm not.
You're not aware of that?
He's not aware of it, but there are people who absolutely are talking about it, because there are people who believe that oral contraception are abortifacients.
There are no states right now that make contraception illegal.
Yeah, but
they're trying to, right?
Okay, so now we've changed the goalposts.
No,
that's literally what I just said.
She's making the honest opinion over what's going on in this country, and because you've ruled that Roe v. Wade was poorly formed, and you've argued, and because it's poorly formed according to Alito, Roe versus Wade was made in part because of Griswold. So if Roe versus Wade was poorly formed, and then Griswold was found to be poorly formed, then you allow the states to be able to then determine whether or not oral contraception can be sold in those states. And there will be states who do decide to ban, or at least try to ban, oral contraception. Now, if they go too far, are they jumping the shark? Do they risk losing more people and say, you know what, y'all have gone too crazy? Maybe, but it's not even something that we should be risking, because this shouldn't even be something that we should be talking about, because Roe versus Wade should not have been overturned. Because if you read the ruling, and I did it on my special show when it was leaked, the ruling's ridiculous. It's very repetitive. It's very, very much full of bad legal arguments, and of course it makes Alito a hypocrite because he claimed to support stare decisis and literally never has.
There are states that are trying to
Mississippi right now is talked about how they're making contraceptives legal is not off the board, which is a pretty intense thing to say.
The state legislature of Mississippi has not said that.
What about Louisiana and the IUD?
About the IUD,
we gotta go, so can we bring it back and wrap it up on whatever?
Yeah, no, I thought we just did bring it back. You brought it back to the war on drugs, that you were studying human rights abroad and can't afford a house, and that's a human right on the internet, and I think we've gone to a lot of different directions, where I wanted to just have a conversation about Roe v. Wade, and I appreciate you going these different directions.
Nicotine? You can smoke if you want.
It's okay, I don't need anything. I appreciate it, though. Thanks for offering. But I think I understand where you guys line up on Roe v. Wade, and I think that there's a divide in this country, and states are going to be able to establish their own laws.
My point is I mean, you're not able to carry a child because I'm assuming that you are a man without a uterus.
Why?
And okay,
well, you're Steven Crowder, and
because you're fucking Steven Crowder, and I know you have a penis.
How do you know I have a penis?
Oh well, I don't. Never mind. It doesn't really.
No. You can show us real quick if you want to prove it.
No, that's a felony.
We're okay with it. We're consenting. So
it doesn't matter. The other people here aren't consenting.
I'll show you mine if you consent.
That's the last thing I want to see.
It's pretty big.
He never goes to the doctor, so maybe.
Yeah, maybe it's because he lays it on the microwave. So
no, maybe because he can't.
I'm a man. I'll go with it. I'm a man. And let me guess. You're about to say because I'm a man, I shouldn't have an opinion on abortion, right?
Well,
do you have an opinion on murder, theft, arson? Come on. It's a silly argument. But
you can have an opinion. We're all entitled to our opinion.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. You guys have a good day. Be safe.
You too.
Well, there you have it. We managed to speak to the view of the majority of Americans on, abortion with some limitations. The radical 30% who...
And look, I'm going to kind of admit here that maybe I was a little bit... He did let that last couple talk for a long time. Now, and they had I thought they had a lot of good things to say, and I think that they're much more informed about the issues than maybe some of his other people were. Now, did he leave them in? I probably think that he maybe left them in because he viewed them as so radical, because, he's studying abroad, he's studying these issues, he's a leftist progressive, probably self-identifies as a socialist, even though he's not a communist, from what he said earlier. So Crowder's probably thinking in this case that it did good to allow them to continue talking about that, because it helped make them look like this is the extremist arguments, and therefore and most of the country is in between the two extremes. Of course, he never really found anybody and presented anybody who represented that other extreme, and he didn't say any opposition to that other extreme, except for maybe that one individual guy who... Well, I guess he gave him a choice and said, you have to pick the extremes, either abortions through 9 months or completely pro-life, and that guy said completely pro-life. But again, you also don't know how many of those early people were legitimately involved in the conversations, or if they were plants or not. But to his credit, Crowder did allow those individuals at the end to have a lot of say, and I think they made a lot of good points. So, but I think I want to say that the reason that it happened again is because he probably said, here are these extremist people, let's see what these extremist people say.
Who don't believe in any at all, and this guy asked us for $5.
I'll get like $5.
And then he went and bought weed. So, I guess subscribe. What does weed go for?
And there you go. So, yeah, subscribe to Liberal Dan Radio here on YouTube. So thank you all very much who stayed with me for the entirety of the show. It turned out to be another 3-hour show. A 3-hour show. A 3-hour show. Radical because they're informed. Josie makes a good point. Was it radical? Yes, it's very radical to be informed at this point, I guess. So, Ethan made a good point, Dan. That's why Rose is ready to say legal. Too many nuances when it is overturned. Absolutely. And there's so many problems. You're going to see so many issues, and the only way you come back and you can then you'd have to then make a ruling. Since this court would have to then find a way to make a ruling if it was going to, which it's not, to say then if there are laws that are overbearing, they'd have to find a way to basically say, okay, this abortion law goes too far. But I don't think they're going to do that because you have the person, Alito, who wrote this opinion, is somebody who does not respect stare decisis. Unlike Roberts. Now, there has been times in the past where Roberts did ignore stare decisis, but on the issue of abortion, he's been pretty consistent. You know, there was the case where he had the Texas heartbeat law where you could turn people into bounty hunters. So this Texas heartbeat law, that was deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, and Chief Justice Roberts was in the minority, I think he wrote the minority dissent in that case. Maybe not. I could be wrong on that. But he was not part of the majority. The majority overturned that law. Later on, the next year, the Louisiana law, that was basically the exact same law, also came up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court looked at it and said, no, we're not going to overturn this law because of stare decisis. We just ruled this law. We're not going to allow this law because we've just ruled this law unconstitutional the year before. And who was part of the side that then said the Louisiana law is also unconstitutional? That was Justice Roberts, because he proved himself at least consistent on this issue. He proved that he was able to basically say, okay, I will support stare decisis. This is the ruling that the Supreme Court made, and I am now bound by this ruling. The idea that you could so easily and so quickly override stare decisis is completely dangerous. Now, should stare decisis be absolute? Absolutely not. If you didn't have exceptions to stare decisis, you would have things like, we wouldn't have Brown versus Board of Education. We'd still be dealing with Plessy versus Ferguson, as an example. So there are clearly times when you do have to override previous precedent because it's so poorly formed. But in this case, it just seemed to be, the ruling was just so poorly written. Because basically what I've said before is Justice Alito is Scalia without the brains. Not that I agree with Scalia a lot of times, but at least his opinions were very well written. Even if they were horribly, Scalia's dissent in Lawrence v. Texas was basically something to the effect of that if you allow Lawrence to be, if you allow this court case to succeed, and if you allow us to overturn the sodomy laws of Texas, and as such the sodomy laws of the entire country, this will be used as a justification to allow gay marriage. That's what he said. Now, he maybe wrote it more artfully than an Alito would have done, and I agree with him that perhaps the argument for freedom to have sex with somebody of the same gender might then, if you rule that that's the freedom that people have, then maybe you could then rule that they should be able to marry too. So sure, that's, but to me, that's not a bug, that's a feature. That's, to use programming parlance, the idea that Lawrence v. Texas could be used to overturn gay marriage bans is not a bug, it's a feature. And eventually we got Obersville v. Hodges. But again, that's also at risk because states are going to be like, ooh, we have carte blanche now. We have 5 conservative justices. There's no way that the liberal justices can overturn this whatsoever. So that's quite unfortunate. Let's see. Hide the Shadows, there's data, shows women who never got pregnant in their life have a higher chance of coming down with ovarian and breast cancer. So even on that simple abortion pill could help reduce that risk for women not wanting kids. That's an interesting idea, interesting concept. Let's see. What else are you going to do with $5? Yeah, in this economy, I'm surprised you got weed for $5 in this economy. I mean, I don't know what the price of weed is, so I can't tell you. Let's see. Illinois, no way you get good weed here. It is legal. You probably get the weed crap for $5. I'll never smoke it because of work, but no way you get good weed for $5. Fair enough. I don't use weed. I do have a CBD oil product that I've used that I feel it's helped me. I mean, I can't necessarily speak for you and what you do, but if anybody who does use CBD oil, you can just email me, liberaldanradio@gmail.com, if you would like to find. And this is like $1 a dose. I want to say it's $1 a dose, and it's like two doses a day, so you actually get more than a month in this thing. So from what I've understood, $1 a dose is a very good deal when it comes to CBD. But I can't talk about certain things about this one, not because it's illegal, but because of the company that sells it. They have certain requirements. So if you are interested in learning more about this CBD, it's just a spray. Email me, I can give you more information on that. Anyway, just because we're on the topic of weed and CBD and the benefits of it, I usually don't promote it, although maybe I should, I don't know. But anyway, so I wanted to thank everybody else. There's no neat intros or outros with this show. I haven't quite figured out how to do that yet with YouTube. I mean, I could opt in and get some streaming service other than OBS and be able to do like the big ones do, but for this case I really don't need a cool intro or outro. Anyway, so thank everybody for watching. I do appreciate it. If you haven't liked the video, please like it. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe as well. If you think that I've made some good points in here in revealing some of the problems that I have with Stephen's arguments, with especially the use of that chart, if you think, and maybe I should just isolate that part of the video and say like the problem with Stephen's chart. But share this video with your friends. Hey, it's even if they don't want to watch the video, it's something they can listen to maybe for 3 hours while at work. Share the channel with your friends. Let everybody know. Again, if you also want to support the show, Liberal Dan Radio on Patreon, or Liberal Dan on Patreon, patreon.com/liberaldan, or patreon.liberaldan.com will bring you there. There's also on liberaldan.com you have the Buy Me a Cider link and the link to the Patreon. You could also support. If you want to support the Stop the Coup, stopthecoup.liberaldan.com brings you there. There's more information on that site as well. So again, just another reminder, Wednesday, 8 p.m. Central, the normal podcast time. Who knows? I could go longer. I could do another surprise or show between now and then. I might even post some more videos between now and the show. But again, Wednesday show is Hal Sparks again. I think it's going to be a monthly thing, so friend of the show, Hal Sparks, will be on the show, and that should make another great show, and I really love having him on. We have a really good time together. Also, tomorrow is my birthday, so another weird thing, if you want to give me a nice birthday present, go ahead and subscribe to the Patreon, send me a Venmo, @LiberalDan on Venmo, go to whatchamacallit, wasn't Venmo. Go to liberaldan.com and do the buy me a cider thing or whatever, and then you could buy me a cider. Was it $5 or so for a glass of cider? It's probably 6 or 7 now, but or just hey, go out there and say I know this guy online. He's awesome. Liberal Dan Radio, talk from the left. That's right. He's trying to make his YouTube channel more successful. So go subscribe to this channel and watch his videos, and let's help get him to at least 1,000, so we could, do things like be monetized and good stuff like that. Anyway, thank you, Suzette, for showing up. I'm glad you're feeling better. Hide in the Shadows, Ethan Wheeler, Aaron, Jolie, Kimchi, everybody else who joined in the conversation. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you all. Have a great day. And wish me a happy birthday. Bye.